Greetings and welcome to the Sunday Show After Dark. The Sunday Show After Dark is a completely different kind of skeptic call-in show because this one is the Sunday Show After Dark. And today I am joined by the lovely and handsome Dr. Aron Adair. How are you doing today, my friend?
Doing just fine, but I'd rather we not start off the show with lies. I am none of those things.
Yeah, you're neither handsome nor a doctor. He's been lying to all of us.
No, you said handsome and lovely. That's what you said. And no. Only my wife is allowed to believe that. Everyone else, let's live in reality, okay?
The most humble person on the planet, more humble than you by a lot. You got to work hard on being as humble as him. He's so fucking humble. So we got a great show today. It's the Sunday Show After Dark, which means we're going to go a little bit longer, take some more calls, talk to some more people, hopefully be able to talk to some theists, some creationists, some people who believe in gods and demons and angels, and also people who disbelieve in science. Aron, you're a physicist, if I remember correctly, and a damn cool one at that. Yep.
That is my training. That is my area of attempted publication.
Right on. I'm a biologist myself. I was on earlier with Erika, who's also a biologist. We got all Science Sunday going on right now. We had Erika and me, and then you and me. Tomorrow, I'm on Skeptalk with Dr. Blitz, who is a mathematical physicist type person. He specializes in things that I don't even understand how to explain. It's crazy to me. So like I'm super stoked. We have just like all scientist block for these three shows. And I hope people call in if you are a creationist, or if you believe in a young Earth, or if you think that the Big Bang model doesn't make any sense, or if you think that the something about chemtrails and frequencies and vibrations and crystals and Reiki and reflexology. Bring your pseudoscience, bring your criticisms, bring your confusions, and let's talk about them. This is the show for you. Number on the bottom of the screen there is 720-619-2288, or you can use the web link in the description to call in over them internets. And to start off, lines are open right now, and we already got people calling in. So use that phone number. If you can't get through right now, try again, because lines are filling up quickly, so you might just hit a full line. Just keep trying. But we're going to start off the show real strong, really quick, with Steve, pronouns he, him, call it in from Nice Eels, who has some things to say, but we're going to take a second before we get there. Steve, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yeah. Hi.
Hey.
Hi, Forrest.
Hey, really
Hi,
quickly,
Aaron.
Steve, before we talk about what you want to talk about, don't say a single word about what you are actually calling in for, what you have on the call screen here, any of that. I have a couple of quick questions for you here. The thing that you're calling in about, did you read about it on the internet?
No, I actually came up with this on my own, actually.
Oh, okay. So this is your own original thought. Do you have any reason to believe it that is based in actual evidence or anything beyond just, I thought of this and there? Okay.
Yeah,
because those are
about,
always where the calls go.
Okay. Yeah, it's about the compression of genetic information from deletional mutations, having removed a dozen or more genes.
Have you taken the time? Have you taken the time to check if there are any explanations for what you're calling in for that are not supernatural?
Sure.
You have.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. So it says here you're calling in about chromosomal fusion, 2 ancestral chromosomes fusing. Are you talking about chromosome number 2 in humans?
Right. It's about removal of a dozen or more genes from the vestigial telomeric region of human chromosome number 2.
Not vestigial.
And this is evidence for evolution being entity-driven rather than randomly occurring by nature.
The fusion of chromosome 2 is a Robertsonian translocation. We see them all the time, and we know how they work, and they are not divinely driven. They do happen. You could use the word randomly, as long as it's the right kind of chromosome.
Yeah, but the loss of that many genes occurring randomly would likely result in fatal loss of vital genetic information, whereas
no, it would not.
Programmer of simulated reductive evolutionary mechanism. It would not? What is this? Just junk DNA? Is this all random DNA?
You said yourself it is telomere, right? And I assume you're talking about the telomeres in the center of the fused chromosome, right? When you said vestigial. So that's what you would be talking about.
Which means, right.
Which means
correct.
Those telomeres number 1 are non-coding DNA. They're not doing anything. They're there to protect the ends of the chromosome. And that is vestigial telomeric DNA. What you're talking about is in the center of the chromosome where a centromere should be. So it actually is not useful DNA for coding anything. So losing a bunch of telomere in the middle of the chromosome would not be a lethal loss of genetics. Yes.
So that's not functional genes being lost, and then
that's
that kind of blows my theory out of the water.
That's why I asked you. Have you actually checked at all?
Well, I knew there was a bunch of junk DNA there, but I thought there was functional DNA in there too, or functional genes in there too. But if you're saying it's all junk DNA, then this just totally blows my theory out of the water.
It's also repetitive. It's actually like the same code phrase in DNA over and over again. So even if you cut it in half, that'd be like saying I got 10 copies of Lord of the Rings. If I lose a few of them, I still got a complete set. That's what the telomere is. It's just the same bit of code a bazillion times.
Okay. Well, I was thinking there was lots of functional genes in there, but that's not what you're saying. So that's why I
asked you. Have you checked? So what did you do to check any of this before you called in?
Oh, I just went on AI. I just checked on my AI bot, and it told me there was functional genes that have been lost. What I thought it said, there were 12 genes, but evidently not.
What have we learned about AI? So we're going to move on now, Steve.
Anyway. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for letting me know.
I don't want to be rude. I really don't. But it is every freaking time. It's every time with Steve. Here's this thing that I heard or that I thought up and
or that the AI chatbot said.
Yeah, like that's not how that works. Actually check. Actually have to do some work. Like I feel like the whole do your own research people like a friend of mine posted something on Threads recently and said, like, if you ask me to a question about something and it's something that you can easily learn by Googling it for less than 30 seconds, like I won't answer it for you. And I think that's a bit harsh, but like, especially like in something like this, like when Steve has spoken to every single person on this channel and had every single person on this channel explain how to like formulate an argument and how to check yourself and how to learn a thing. Like, dude, come on. So I just want to get that one out of the way right away. We've got coming up next, Tori, pronouns he, him, calling in from Tiny Xylophones, has a question for you, Aaron. Wants to ask about the most likely theory of what will happen to the state of matter if the theory of supersymmetry were to occur in the universe. That is so far outside of my field. So I have no idea where to start with that. Tori, you are on the line with Forrest and Aaron. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you for being here.
Mm-hmm.
You voiced my question rather exquisitely. I pretty much wrote it out for the call screener, and that's
all I did was read it.
Directly how I would word it.
Cool. Yeah, that's all I did was read it because I have no idea what this means. So it's up to you to tell what you mean to Aaron, unless Aaron already knows. I'll try to participate if I can. No promises.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so Tori, just very quickly from the reading, it's a little bit unclear if we should expect to see anything different at the level that we humans interact at, that pretty much everything that like supersymmetry might predict would only be in particles that we could find with even more powerful particle accelerators than we've already built, because we built them, we've put a ton of energy into them, we still don't see it, so either it doesn't exist or we need even bigger ducking accelerators, so it's not something we're going to see in day-to-day life. So I'm curious what you're trying to get at with the question.
I'm trying to see, like, if the universe was to eventually change its state, how matter, like us as humans, our consciousnesses, etc., would live on, basically.
At the least, I don't see the intersection with supersymmetry. That, and just for the sake of the audience, supersymmetry is basically a prediction that we will see even more particles when we look for them, but also be extremely high mass. And so they give all sorts of honestly dumb names. So there's the proton, and the supersymmetric partner of the proton is the sparton. It's just the sproton or the selectron, or the neutrino, or everywhere they just throw an S onto it and make it sound as stupid as it sounds. The math isn't stupid, the naming convention is.
Right.
As a biologist, I can thoroughly relate to
that. And I know that we're not going to have any particular answers for a very long time, if even in our lifetime. But I was just looking for what, in the physicist community, what the most likely theory is to what they think will happen, if you were to know by chance.
Well, okay, so I, for one, am not too hot on supersymmetry, because every single time someone has tried to predict the existence of a supersymmetric particle that we can actually build a detector for, we don't find it. And basically every theoretical physicist that works on this has their own version of supersymmetry. So there isn't just one version, there's basically as many as you want. Just so long if you're good enough at juggling the math, and honestly I was not, but those who have been much better at that, virtually every different theorist has their own slightly different variant on supersymmetry to basically say, well, what if we try with this particular symmetry or this particular breaking of symmetry? What kind of particles might pop out from there? Could this be a candidate for dark matter? Things like that. So it's basically just a bunch of what ifs with a much bigger chalkboard. And because you can do that indefinitely, we might never find a supersymmetric particle that way, because quite literally, every time you look for it and you don't find it, the theorist could just come along and say, oh, so it must be an even higher energy level that we need to find. I'll just add this extra term to my math. So it's made me a little bit upset that this is how things are going. It makes me feel like it's not a successful avenue anymore. But boy, oh boy, if tomorrow they find the particle, I'm totally on board. Just that this lack of success and the fluidity of how the predictions are made makes me feel like we need to try a different method. But I'm not smart enough to get a better way.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that supersymmetry is the most well accepted state of how the universe will reshape eventually. Correct?
Well, no one's really talking about the universe reshaping itself given supersymmetry or not. Really, I shouldn't say we're all. Supersymmetry would have the ability to explain a number of features, in particular something that's called the hierarchy problem. Basically, you look at the different flavors of the same kind of particle. So everyone knows the electron. Electrons are great. Everyone should have as many electrons as they can. They can fill their car with electrons and zip it down the road. But there's another kind of particle with the exact same charge, a lot of the same properties. It's called the muon, but it's thousands and thousands of times more massive, and it has a half-life on the order of a millionth of a second. And there's a similar particle called the tauon, which is like the muon. It has the same charge, the electron, but it's even massively greater in mass and even shorter lifespan. And folks wonder, well, why are there these massive differences in the masses, and why do they seem that why is it that they have like these different orders of magnitude in that? Supersymmetry is supposed to try to go through and show why there's that kind of structuring. That's one of the goals of these beyond the standard model theories that are out there. But whether those things are true or not, it doesn't really say too much about what the ultimate fate of the universe is. The only exception I can think to that is we don't know what dark energy is. It's the thing that we see the effects of on the accelerating rate of the expansion of the universe. And because we don't know what that is, one might ask the question, well, might it change with time? Might it actually somehow reverse? If you don't know what fundamentally drives it, then you really can't say with the highest confidence. And if you can come up with a theory for it based on supersymmetry or some other high energy particle physics approach, and then you can say, oh, but at this point it'll reverse, that would change our estimates of what the future of the universe is. But that is doubly speculative because I don't think there's any version of supersymmetry out there that suggests that. Just saying that imagining a theory like that possibly existing and why it would have any impact on a future universe prediction.
Right. And sorry, I'm not trying to waste your time. But I guess what I'm asking is a what if question. Like if it were to occur, what we could potentially think to expect if there is like a greater believed theory among the physicist community. I was just wondering if you knew by chance.
Well, so are you saying, for example, like, could it lead to some sort of like revolution in technology because we'd understand fundamental physics even better?
No, I'm trying to ask like, sorry, I'm trying to ask if, like, since they wanted to take theist calls, I'll put it this way, like, if our consciousness is to continue to exist in the universe somewhere with an afterlife, if supersymmetry were to occur, what would happen to those tiny bits of pieces that are left from us that is matter?
So I think supersymmetry is ultimately irrelevant to that question. I should also note, it's not just the grammar of the way you're asking the question. I want to slightly correct as well. It's not that supersymmetry will occur, is that supersymmetry is either correct or incorrect. And it would be explaining what's happening in all of particle physics from the earliest time of the universe to the end of time and everything in between. It's not something that will switch on the moment we discover it. So I'm just adjusting your the way you were asking that a little bit. But most importantly, whether supersymmetry is true or not, it seems irrelevant to questions of consciousness or an afterlife. Ultimately, it looks like the way consciousness is derived is from the brain, and everything going on in here is completely explicable within the electromagnetic forces primarily.
I guess I'm just looking for.
Rory, I don't know if you're able to see these things, but I'm getting some good jokes from Forrest here on his whiteboard. So you might want to watch the stream later and see him give his best
strong nuclear force,
particle
y'all.
physics jokes.
I'm sorry. I guess.
But yeah.
I guess what I'm going for is the what if. Like, what if it were to occur, and like, what if our consciousness does continue to exist after life? Like, how would the universe shift, and what is the most likely like belief that would happen to matter if supersymmetry were to occur?
Okay. Yeah, so again, supersymmetry seems completely irrelevant from this conversation because I'll note we can tell that if supersymmetry is a correct theory of subatomic physics, it has no relevant effect in the brain because we have particle accelerators that have energy levels billions of times greater than exist inside of our brains. And those accelerators and particle detectors can't find the evidence for supersymmetry. So if it is there, we need even higher levels of energy and better levels of detection, which definitely don't exist in the piles of meat in our skulls. So supersymmetry is going to be completely irrelevant. We can say very confidently that supersymmetry is just irrelevant to the way the brain works.
Okay, that's fine. But okay, what about the state of matter outside of the brain, like the things throughout the entire universe?
Well, again, the energy levels that might be needed to see any effects from supersymmetry are again going to be stupendously high. So you're not even going to see them in you might not even see them inside of stars in nuclear reactors. You might only see them perhaps in supernovae, or perhaps even only in effects at the birth of the universe itself. And I use birth here a little bit metaphorically, but the at the hot Big Bang phase or the inflationary phase, potentially, very, very early in the universe. And after that, the only time any effects from supersymmetry are going to be noticed is civilizations like ours coming along and probing with high enough concentrations of energy to actually detect that. It's really going to be only in the most esoteric ways that there's going to be any noticeable effect, given supersymmetry of some form is true.
So, what are you saying, that there is no most commonly accepted theory? Because there's no way that we could even fathom it?
It's not that we can't fathom it. It's, well, for one thing, I mentioned earlier, there are too many people fathoming it. There's too many different versions of supersymmetry. And they definitely can't all be right. They all could be wrong. And so far, anytime any of the predictions of those supersymmetry theories have been able to test, we don't find anything there. So that's been the problem. So we don't know if supersymmetry is true, and if it is true, we don't know what version it might be.
Then maybe you could educate me a little bit on what the most commonly accepted version is.
Again, I don't think there is a most commonly accepted version. Literally every physicist or theorist who works on this has their own version of supersymmetry. There's about as many supersymmetry theories out there as there are physicists working on the question.
So I'm not trying to sound rude, but it sounds like you're saying that there is no answer to my question.
At least right now, we don't have a consensus on what is the best version of supersymmetry, and we don't have empirical evidence that any version of supersymmetry is true. So there is nothing but division amongst physicists about how to answer these questions.
Then maybe I should just what do you personally believe?
For this, I honestly don't know. I am at least as much of a loss on what to do to answer these questions as the people who spend every day and night working on this sort of research. It is extremely difficult to know what to do next. The best I can say is we're going to probably have our questions answered better once we've made observations of new things that we have not yet come across, and allow us to test outside of what we're currently doing with particle accelerators. We don't see anything, make a bigger one. Still don't see anything, make an even bigger one. That's kind of where a lot of particle physics has gone. We might have more success in new discoveries in astronomy that, occasionally the universe shoots something at us that we can't understand, and it somehow gives us a new wake-up call for what might be going on. That has been historically true for a long time. I'm going to take you back 23 centuries, just as a starting point. Aristotle says, we could tell from observation that the universe is constant. It never changes. The stars that were around yesterday were also around centuries ago. We can tell that from the observations from the Babylonians. It's always the same sky. And then somebody goes along and says, what's that big bright thing up there? That new star that just popped up? Because a supernova had gone off. They didn't know it was a supernova at the time. They didn't know it was an exploding star. But when they had that observation that they understood as, hey, this is a new star appearing, this made them say, hey, it looks like the universe actually does change. We better, observe this thing very carefully and see what other subtle changes we might miss. And once they started doing those very careful measurements, they actually noticed, hey, the entire rotation in the night sky seems to have this additional extra rotation beyond just what you get from the apparent rotation of the Earth. And then they discovered what we now call the precession of the equinoxes, the actual wobbling of Earth's axis because it's a big top. That they actually discovered about 21, 22 centuries ago, all by careful observation. And nobody was expecting that. And we only started explaining it in more recent centuries because of our understandings of momentum and gravity. We make other observations and they let us realize, hey, that's a weird thing. We can't explain that. And that helps, I think, push theoretical physics the most. Coming across something new and go, well, who ordered that? Because we didn't expect it.
I see. So it sounds like what you're saying is that each physicist has their own beliefs in what would occur. Like, I know that we're not going to have, call me crazy if you will, but I'm hoping that we'll have more answers around like 2047 maybe. But it's sounding like what you're saying.
Any reason to give any particular timeline. I have no reason to make those sorts of predictions. It's in general, it's hard to make predictions, especially about the future. And when it comes to when we're going to discover things in science, I definitely can't make that prediction.
Right.
But as time goes on, progress will be made. But I think progress has been slower than we wanted to because we haven't yet been able to find weird anomalies in particle physics that helps drive the direction of our theoretical things. Here's actually been the problem with particle physics. It's actually been too successful. When the standard model of particle physics was devised by the 1970s, everything it's predicted has come to fruition. And most recently, with the discovery of the Higgs boson back in 2012, when we said, hey, we've actually discovered that, that was basically like the final coup de grace for the standard model. So the problem is now we've been trying to find any sorts of experiments that break the standard model, and we can't find that. That has been the annoying thing. Our model is too good, even though we know it can't be the final answer. So that's been the annoying thing. We're looking for something it's wrong about, and we can't find a way to break it yet.
May I ask how we know that it can't be the final answer?
Well, for one thing, it doesn't explain gravity at all. So it has nothing in there even connected to gravity. It doesn't explain things like I mentioned, the hierarchy problem. We see that, hey, these particles over here are much more massive than these same kinds of particles over here. Why is that? We don't have an explanation for that from the standard model. Originally, also, the standard model didn't predict that the neutrino would have a mass at all. Originally, they figured the neutrino just had no mass, and then we discovered actually neutrinos can change their flavor. The kind of neutrino they are will change as they're zipping through space. And that can only happen if it's going at less than the speed of light, which requires it having mass. And now there's all this work to figure out what is the mass of neutrino. And originally, there was no actual prediction of the neutrino even having a mass, let alone what particular mass. So there's a number of things that it does not explain, but the definite predictions it makes so far have not been broken, even though we've been trying really hard. And occasionally we think, oh, we see some bump in the data that goes outside of what we expect from the standard model. And then we do more analysis and it doesn't work out. It's both annoying and it also shows we had some amazing work happen in the 70s that we've been trying for half a century to say it's wrong or show where it's wrong. And we haven't so far succeeded just because it was too good. And same thing with Einstein's general theory of relativity. Over and over again, Einstein, right again, Einstein, right again, Einstein, right again. It's like, dang it, we want to move forward here. Einstein, stop being right.
That's fair. But I guess just to conclude, it seems like that you're saying that there is no way for us to know, to be basic, without just having to make an absolute prediction, right?
Well, again, I guess it depends on what you're referring to. Like earlier, you were talking about consciousness, and again, everything that we're talking about right now and where we're working in the study of particle physics is irrelevant to understanding how the brain works. The brain fundamentally works based on chemistry, and chemistry is well understood with current particle physics and quantum mechanics. Like the way the orbitals in atoms function is straight up from electrons zipping around protons. We don't need to understand quarks or other subatomic particles to explain electron orbitals that are fundamental to chemistry. And since we understand the chemistry, or at least a lot of the chemistry, we understand those as the building blocks for what goes on in the brain. And as best as we can tell, what the brain does is ultimately what provides consciousness. That the brain doing stuff gives us the senses of us thinking about stuff. And whether or not there are supersymmetric particles will be irrelevant to that, because they are doing as close to nothing as can be inside of our brains, unless you happen to have an extremely high energy tera electron volt particle accelerator inside your skull. And if you do, I would like access to that.
Oh, sure, no problem. What about, like, let's say a dust cloud out in space? Like, how would that be affected?
For the most part, probably not at all. Pretty much everything with dust clouds is going to be affected by electromagnetism, and particularly in the form of light pushing on dust, and most importantly, gravity. Unless the dust collapses into a star, it's probably not going to deal with anything related to the strong force. The weak force is probably irrelevant. So anything beyond that with other physics that goes beyond what we currently know, as far as we can tell, because we have probed matter so well and we understand it so well, anything we missed has to be extremely subtle. And subtle things are not going to be the main drivers.
So you're saying that it's possible that they're not affected at all, even though we're talking about
at least not enough to notice, not enough to notice, not enough to be measurable, not enough to matter for any predictions.
Okay. Then I think you answered my question the best as you could.
He answered that question better than anybody could, I think.
All right.
So, all right, Troy. Well, thank you so much.
Tori, you happen to be in a place where you could have had a good particle accelerator. Back in the 80s, they were actually building a super particle accelerator even more powerful than the one currently in Europe. But what did we do to it? We dug the hole, did nothing with it, and now it's just filled with garbage, I think, at this point.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
Sounds like us.
Yep.
Right. Take care, Tori. I appreciate you calling in.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Bye-bye.
All right. Good night.
I learned some stuff. I was like, I'm freaked out about. I think the thing you were talking there at the very end about, like, we understand this stuff so well. If we miss something, it's super, super tiny and fundamental. And like, I was just listening. So I got back from PsyCon yesterday. And they had Brian Cox there doing a talk about whatever the hell he wanted, because he was just allowed to just talk for a while. And he told us that, like, the new frontier of things is, like, we are finding that, like, space-time itself is made of things, is like not particles, but like it has fundamental parts. And he explained it quite thoroughly. And like the first 20 to 30 minutes of his talk, I was like, yeah, totally got it, makes sense. And then he started getting into like the pieces of information that are a black hole, and I'm like, fucking what? And it just blew my mind to shit. It was so cool. I honestly love calls like that, where you just learn a ton of cool stuff about science. That's so freaking great. And now we're going to do something completely different, because we have other callers on the line, and the lines are still open, by the way. We have, at this moment, we have 2 lines open for theists. But that is only because 2 people are currently in the queue, and we have 2 waiting. The people who are currently in the queue and in the screening room and everything like that, sometimes pop in and out. The amount of theist calls that call in and drop, astronomical. So like theists, if you're out there, if you have questions about the Big Bang or about evolution or whatever, this is your chance to call and talk about it. For right now, we're going to talk to TJ, pronouns he, him, calling in all the way from Canada, who wants to know if we would try an experiment to prove God involving lucid dreaming. Don't know how that's going to go. TJ, you're on the line with Forrest and Aaron. How you doing? DJ, if you're calling in on the web caller, you need to make sure your phone is awake. If your phone is got a black screen, we can't hear you. You can hear us. So just tap your phone, make sure it's woken up. TJ going once. TJ going twice. All right, TJ, I'm going to return you to the queue. We have not hung up. We're just going to put you back in the queue for a minute, and we're going to come back to you later on. In the meantime, let's go ahead and take care of Kay, who's been waiting for a very long time, and we'll use him to buffer between tries of TJ here. Kay is pronouns he, him, calling in from Artistic Zoonotics, talking about viruses that transmit between species and also can paint. Wants to talk about Donald Hoffman. I don't know who that is. Talk about space-time, talk about materialism. This is another you call, my friend. Kay,
maybe.
you were on the line with Forrest and Aaron. What are you talking about? What's going on?
Hi, yes. I'm calling back a couple of days ago. I had a talk with Aaron about materialism.
Okay. Was it productive?
Yeah.
Not really. But to be fair, that's probably likely my fault. But let's try to make this productive. So
sure.
I'll try my best, though I should give you a warning that my brain may not be fully here, because before this call, I went to make myself a cup of coffee with my coffee machine, and I realized I forgot to put the mug there. So I'm not all here right now.
Yeah.
We'll do our best. So if that last call is any indication, you're on point, my guy.
Yeah, he was really good. Okay.
What specifically are you talking about?
Yeah, so I wanted to revisit, maybe not the whole argument, but at least one of the premises from Alvin Plantinga's argument against materialism and evolution. Mm-hmm. And the premise or the proposition is just this: it's if materialism is true and evolution by natural selection is true, then our cognitive faculties are not reliable. So what are your thoughts on that?
How does that follow? That doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm. So I think his Alvin Plantinga's idea is that evolution selects, or at least evolution by natural selection selects for fitness, not so much for organisms that perceive reality truthfully, isomorphically. Let's even say.
So evolution is going for fitness, not necessarily for truth making. But would you say there is at least a correlation between what is true and what will lead to fitness?
Can you say that again?
Do you think there's at least a correlation between that which is true and that which will lead to fit outcomes? Basically, can you select so much for fitness that it's irrelevant what's actually true? Or if you are trying to have a fit organism, it actually has to have beliefs that are at least approximately true. Can it just be completely, or in math terms, we say orthogonal? Are these two things completely moving independently of each other? Is truth independent of that which is leading to the fitness of a creature?
Well, if you ask me, a complete ignorant, my intuition says that no, that they're not exclusive. It seems like, again, this is just my intuition. It would seem that you would have to at least perceive whatever reality is, at least to some degree, truthfully, right? So if there's let's say an eagle coming at me, I don't perceive it as a fly, right?
Right, but like that's
so
I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I'm understanding. I don't remember the exact wording that you use. You said if evolution is true, then our senses are unreliable. How did you phrase that exactly?
Our cognitive faculties are not reliable.
Cognitive faculties. Okay. So let me write that down. Cognitive faculties. Okay. So I just want to make sure that I'm saying the right thing so I'm not talking past you. No, actually, it would be better for us to get false positives. So like I to your point, to like speaking to credit what you're saying, it would be advantageous for us to have false positives and think that a threat is there when it isn't, and to think that the rustling in the bushes is a tiger when it isn't, because that is safe. However, what I think is important to point out is that even if I take that to the extreme and say that our cognitive faculties are unreliable completely, that is the point of science. The first, like, and most important logical fallacy that you learn about is naive realism. The idea that our five senses alone are enough to tell us about the nature of the universe. And so the whole endeavor of scientific understanding is looking for ways to translate the nature of the universe into a way that our five senses can understand it.
I should note, though, that what Kay's argument is based on Plantinga is that if this argument holds, there is an inconsistency between saying we're going to use science and the scientific method and also believe in materialism. They're saying that there's a epistemic inconsistency between the two. That's the issue. That's at least the argument, what's inconsistent. But I think we're already making some progress on a good point, because so Kay seems to agree with me that there's at least some correlation between figuring out what's true and that also at least correlating with fitness, that it can't be completely orthogonal, that you can become perfectly fit but always be wrong. But also, as you, Forrest, as you're noting, false positives are often not a big deal. Conversely, false negatives could be the last thing that you ever do. So that's why there's going to at least be a correlation, but not necessarily perfection, because evolution will basically say, in like the example of the rustling in the bushes, false negatives about that is the end of that creature. False positives is a little bit of stress for half an hour. Not as big a deal in that sort of thing. So in that case, we're going to see evolutionary pressures towards getting things right, but not necessarily getting things perfectly tuned. So evolution would predict our faculties will be mostly useful, but definitely fallible.
Yeah. And now that you're mentioning that, I'm remembering that I saw on a PBS documentary. I forgot the specific species, but there's some fox here in North America that's endangered, and I don't know the name for these type of scientists. I guess ecologists are trying to spread the fox to other areas of North America, and so a lot of them kept dying. So what they've been doing is that they've been going to let's say a little family unit of foxes, and they'll sound off this is fake, or let me say a recorded sound of like a hawk, and so they'll see the reaction of the foxes, and the foxes that immediately get into their foxhole those foxes are the ones that they then snatch to reintroduce them in another area, because those foxes actually have a higher probability of survivorship, because those foxes they get really scared and so they immediately hide, and so they're more
the ones who know to
likely
run
to
away.
survive.
Yeah.
So
I don't.
Yeah.
So
I
think that basically is a bit of empirical evidence to exactly what we're talking about. That we see these sorts of selection factors that can be driven even by false signals, ultimately because it still could be advantageous in some sort of environment. So indeed, evolution will not select us to being perfect reasoning, perfect sensing machines, but it also has to be good enough to make sure that we don't just imagine whatever we want and just start falling off cliffs and eating poisonous berries thinking that they're watermelons. There has to be at least some level of correlation between reality and how we're thinking about reality without the mapping necessarily being perfect. So honestly, things seem to be consistent not only with evolution, but also with the way our minds actually are, because our minds often kind of cruddy in getting to conclusions. We can do brilliant things, but with a whole lot of effort. If I want to do a math theorem, it takes a whole lot of effort. But if I want to just come up with a political argument, I can get hot in the face and be effective very quickly without necessarily saying anything true. Please see the entirety of cable news television.
Okay. I guess we can admit that maybe our cognitive faculties are not, let's say, our ideas of reality and whatever reality is are not isomorphic. Maybe they're homomorphic or bisimilar, or there's a correlation, like you said. There's some overlap.
Yeah,
we're not.
There's a gist to it, and there has to be to some extent. Otherwise, we couldn't have possibly survived. We have to have some correspondence between the reality outside of our brains and what our brains simulate about it, because that is just not survivable. But we don't expect our brains to be perfect simulators, and often not so good.
It's long and short of it.
Yeah, could we move on to the Donald Hoffman? I mean, it's somewhat sort of related.
The what?
I have to say, Donald I know Hoffman. Nothing about this person, so you're going to have to give us a crash course.
I don't know who this is either.
Oh, okay. Well, I only know I don't know enough about him. I would say to represent him fairly, but supposedly he has this mathematical theorem. What's let me see what's the name? It's fitness beats truth theorem. And so his theorem says something like this, that the probability that natural selection or that organisms evolved, at least over time, to have a truthful perception of reality is zero. So the probability of that is zero. I guess we kind of already discussed that.
Yeah, I don't know who this person is or what their way of testing that probability is. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think the fact that if we can agree that our understanding of reality is at least pretty good, like we were just talking about, has some overlap. The fact that lots of other organisms also seem to act and behave in ways that comport with reality the same way that we do means that this either definitely can evolve because it's apparently happened a lot, or best case scenario, or I should say the most simple way of saying it would be that this is a very ancestral state that is now kind of passed on throughout most of the animal kingdom. That doesn't really seem reasonable considering what some of those common ancestors are. It seems more reasonable to say that self-awareness and awareness of reality and some level of consciousness is a convergent trait. It's something that's come up several times, but that's just me. I don't know. I'm still kind of at a loss for like what direction going forward this whole thing.
So because I don't know anything about this person, I've had to do what I need to do at this point, and that is find something on Wikipedia. And there is a Wikipedia page about him, and it looks like part of his argumentation is that because our sense organs are going to only lead us to what's fit rather than what's real, this seems to be part of his larger arguments that the ultimate reality is actually mental and not physical. So he's as Wikipedia says, a non-physicalist monist, which basically means that there's one kind of substance, but the fundamental substance isn't actually physical, it must be mental.
That's where we are. See, so that's the first thing I wrote down at the beginning of this call, my first notes were like, is this a call about idealism and is the universe conscious? Like that was the first thing I was like, I'd say, but this whole time been a little bit confused is like what we were getting to. So that's what it's boiling down to then is that like there's some sort of way in which consciousness is actually constructing the universe.
Yeah. So I'm not at least in this call, I'm not really wanting to. I mean, we can talk about that. I don't even know enough. I know that so there's two steps to his argument, right? So one thing is the first step is to argue against materialism. Now the next step is to argue for idealism. I'm just only considering the first step. If the first step doesn't succeed, then he can't. I guess you could try to make the second step to argue for idealism, but then you would have to resolve materialism.
Yeah.
But I think so I guess just to recap, I think we've already kind of talked about this, or his theorem, or unless you guys have something else to add on his theorem.
Nope.
I don't think I can, since I haven't seen his theorem, see what premises it has, see what other considerations would go into it. Yeah. So it's really hard for me to describe and critique a piece of math that I've never seen.
Right.
Yeah. I got nothing on it. It just, I've yet to be impressed with an argument for idealism. So like if someone wants to try to explain to me how matter isn't real, they're going to have to find a new and interesting way to do it, because maybe it's just not my speed. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next call, Kay, but I appreciate you calling
in. Could I just ask you the last topic, a question about the last topic?
Sure, briefly.
Yeah. So I'm a agnostic atheist. I left a Christian fundamentalist church, and that's a euphemism for a cult. And so I have friends and family members still in this organization. And so I've had these conversations where I'm trying to make them realize that it's all bullshit. And so like, for example, my one of my parents has depression, takes antidepressants, and let's say another friend, he also had depression, had suicide thoughts. So my question is, how do I navigate, or what are your thoughts about the, I guess, like the ethics of these conversations with people like this? Because I get the sense that if I were to conclusively argue and they agree that what they believe in is bullshit, I think they would be very unstable. Yeah.
Tell them they need to talk to recovering from religion, because they can talk to actual therapists and counselors who have been in similar situations and have found a way out and have found meaning. You also need to decide if those conversations are worth it for your relationship with those people, and how much of that relationship you're willing to sacrifice for those conversations. But recovering from religion is going to do a lot better job than us, especially since they have actual counselors there. And normally I would give my advice, but especially if these people are struggling with suicidality, it would be wholly inappropriate for me to try to tell you what to tell them, That's just not cool. I would tell them to call 988 if they have any serious suicidal thoughts or ideations to worry about. That is the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline that anybody can call and get help anytime. And I would say to the entire audience listening that if you are thinking about it at all, call that fucking number, because I want you to stay around. With that, we're now going to move on, Kay, all right?
All right, thanks a lot. You guys take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. For real, like actual serious talk, if you're struggling, call 988. If you think that your struggle isn't big enough and you should save those resources for other people and you're just, all these, call. Just do it. That's what they're there for. That's their whole job. That's what they're paid for. And they're there to help you out. And it is better for you to call and realize you didn't need to than need to and not call. Just call. 988 for anybody who's struggling with suicidal ideation. Do it before you die, because we want you to stick around. With that, I'm going to give another chance for TJ here. Wants to try an experiment with God. Unless you have something before we move on, Aaron. I didn't want to just bulldoze here.
Nope.
Sweet. All right, we're going on for TJ. TJ, take 2. TJ, are you there? TJ, can you hear us? Double tap your phone. Make sure it's awake. Talk to us about your God experiment. You called in twice. You called, and then you dropped, and then you called back with it. This is clearly something you want to talk about, and something that I want to talk about too. This is your chance to talk to us, and it's coming up on 30 seconds. So I'm probably gonna not keep waiting for you, TJ. Yeah, I'm sorry, TJ. If you can hear us, we cannot hear you. So I'm gonna have to let you go. But if you can, call back with a way that works. I'm into it. You probably had a working phone a moment ago because you were able to get through the call screen. So, call us back and try to present your thing.
Hello?
Is that TJ?
Yep. Sorry, I didn't have the computer watching.
And now you're eating your phone.
Yeah, no, I'm on a.
TJ, are you there?
Yeah, just give me one. Switch to the earbuds here.
Okay.
Nope, don't switch to earbuds. It sucks. Just talk directly into your phone. Oh, we're off to a weird start with TJ. TJ, can you hear us? All right, I can't. It's been almost 2 minutes now. We've been just waiting for TJ. This is dead air. This is bad. TJ, if you're just calling to waste our time, you did it for 2 minutes, I guess. It's over now. Goodbye, TJ. We'll try again later. Maybe he'll call back. Maybe he actually has something to say. Who knows? Lines are still open for theists. We've got 3 lines open right now. So theists, if you believe in a God, if you have a reason to doubt evolution or the Big Bang, if you believe that the Bible is real, if you believe there's some utilitarian purpose for your religion, if any reason that you want to defend your beliefs or poke and prod and ask us to defend our own, this is your opportunity. Call in that number at the bottom of the screen there, 720-619-2288, or use the link in the web description to call in. Just make sure your phone is awake when you talk to us. But for right now, we're going to move on to somebody that I've already talked to today and had a great time with. We've got Max calling in from Irritated Lizards. I am also irritated. Bronzy him wants to say that religion is really good at controlling people. That's why it's beneficial for the state. I have some words about that. Max, you're on the line with Forrest and Eris. How are you doing? Aaron, how are you doing? Forrest and Eris. Jesus Christ.
Hi, guys. So I would just like to say that, that's my thesis, that it's very important if we want to point the direction of the people in a certain way. And my few examples are, the Romans, how they used the religion to organize their society and to succeed in conquering Italy. and also in the way that the Muslims have used that to overtake the Middle East in the 600s, and also how the Crusaders used that to respond to them 500 years later.
So I would agree with you that it's good for controlling people. Religion is, at its core, a domestication tool for humans. But you're calling in as a theist, which means you not only believe that it's good for control, you also believe that it's true. So, and if I remember correctly, it actually says here on the screen, we talked earlier, you, Erika, and I, and your reason for believing that it's true is Pascal's wager. So, here we are with I agree with you. It's good at controlling people. That's one of the most evil, insidious parts about it. We care if it's true. So, do you have a reason for believing that it's true, or are we just going to agree and say, hey, yeah, it's good for control? Because I disagree that it's beneficial. It's beneficial for the state, for sure.
I think
but definitely not beneficial
for the state.
Right, it's beneficial
I don't
controlling assholes who...
I don't want to take another 40 minutes of your guys' time just to
Neither do I. I'm saying it's beneficial for the state. Yes, it is beneficial for people who are in charge to stay in charge. It is beneficial to scare people into control. It is a domestication tool for humans. I agree with that.
Well,
is it true?
I wouldn't say it like that. I would say it's, even if it was false, it would be good for everyone to believe in it because it would make the country stronger. You know, today
so that is the noble lie from Plato. What you're describing there is from Plato's Republic. That's Socrates' noble lie that we have to just tell people that there's this hierarchy that they're born into so that they behave and make the state stronger. The problem with that, Max, is that that is imposing your ideals of what progress should be at the sacrifice of integrity, honesty, kindness, decency, humanity, equality. Like, that is an evil proposition that you're giving us here. And it goes hand in hand with the kind of evil that you're describing when you talk about religion being good for the state. Good for the state,
I would just like
not good for the people in that state.
That what is good for the state is often good for the people in that state. You know, after World War II,
it's not the same as
America,
always.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How good is it for women and LGBT people when religion is dominant and drives the state? Historically speaking.
It's not good. It's not good. It's
not good at all.
Very bad. And that's why it needs to be reworked.
It's good for the dominant racial and socioeconomic class is who it's good for.
I wouldn't say it's good for like working class white people, you know.
That's not what I said.
You know, it's
that's not what I just said. I said it's
the dominant
racial and socioeconomic class.
Yeah, so working class white people, right?
Working class people are not the dominant socioeconomic class. They are the most abundant.
Oh, you mean like
they are not the dominant.
Yeah.
It works for rich white people, especially rich, heterosexual, cisgendered white men. That's who it works for. And that is who it has always worked for.
When Rome was in its nascency, it was a small country, and through the use of religion, it became a large empire. Now, do you think Romans benefited from it, or do you think that
that is not just from the use of religion, that is from the use of slavery and conquest. So it's not like they went out there evangelizing. They went out there butchering and conquered lands. They didn't preach to them. They slaughtered them.
But how would they mobilize their
if you were to talk to a person who studies classical belief systems, they would actually say the word religion doesn't apply to anything in the ancient world. If you talk to a Roman about religion, they would not understand it the same way that a Protestant Christian understands that word today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's because the Catholic Church has messed it up, you know, with their.
I specifically said the Protestants. It was like one of the books I have back here is called Before Religion, and it tries making the argument that basically before the modern era, and the modern era basically being the cutoff of the 30 Years' War, which itself was not exactly a happy-go-lucky religious time in Europe. but that basically after that time, what we now understand religion is when it was codified, and that's also the time Europeans were going around the world and colonizing and coming across all these other peoples and trying to understand them and trying to push them into the bucket of what they understood religion and quote unquote true religion was. And making the case that, hey, in a lot of these cases, there just isn't even a word for religion in a lot of these other cultures. So they had to be imported. There was no indigenous word for religion in India, in China, in Japan, etc. And even the word religion or religio coming from the Latin doesn't have the same connotations that we use it for today. So in many ways, religion is a modern construct and somehow a human universal. Literally, people who study religion, not theologians, but like who do it as an academic study, basically agree that there's no working definition of religion because everything they try to work it on, they can find so many things that it doesn't work well on that they know that this is actually a language game problem. So be very careful how we're using the terms here and say this is what the Romans were doing because they would not have understood at all this concept of religion that you're applying to them. They didn't have churches, they didn't have creeds, they didn't have heretics.
Yeah, and I get it, and I'm not talking about it in that sense. I'm talking about it in the sense of, they had these like auspices, right? They were like doing these chicken auspices, whatever, and that was just something that was motivating them to do certain things, like go out and take this city or take other city, and in that sense, it was a very useful and needed tool for them. And it's something that can help them keep contracts, for example, right? It helped them, with like commerce and stuff. And I understand that now, people are not religious in the same like manner as they were, and we have like a huge crisis. Like no one wants to join the military. No one wants to, really fight for the country anymore because Kamala and her policies are like making people unsure in our country.
Just so we're clear, Max, her name is Kamala, and also her policies and ideas are not the reason why enrollment in the military are down by any stretch of the imagination. People were not enlisting in the military for the same reasons that I don't, way before she ever came along.
Yeah, I get the feeling there's more reason that people might be reluctant to join the military based on what happened in the 2000s with the Iraq War and the less than good intelligence that was applied to justify that invasion.
Yeah.
That, at least when I was a youngster getting out of high school and what was going on at the time, it's just like, yeah, I definitely don't feel like being dragged into this. I don't think the war is justified. In fact, I don't even think there was real evidence for it. And yet now there's tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people dead in that region because of that. It's like, yeah, that does not make me want to join into it. And yet, conversely, my current daytime job is actually defense sector work. So full circle for me.
Well, it's great that you are working for the benefit of our country. And that's what I'm saying. Like in Ukraine, for example, Ukraine, after Russia attacked them, had a lot of people, a lot of young men, someone like who's 20, who's 25, people who should be fighting on the front lines, just leave, go as refugees to be like beggars on the streets of like Berlin and other countries that would take them, instead of staying put and fighting for their nation. And Russia, on the other hand, is using religion very well. It's using it as like a tool, saying, "Oh, guys, God wants you to go out and fight." They have this war sermons.
If Russia is using religion so well, why did they ask the atheist North Koreans to come and send troops to help them? Because the Russians are losing thousands of troops every day to casualties.
Well, the answer to that is very simple. It's because they are corrupt. They're just completely rotten through.
So that's why they have to go to the atheist country of North Korea for help.
Yeah. Turns out their religion wasn't that good after all, huh?
No, it's good, but there's just so much you can do just on the spirit alone when you don't have artillery shells.
They're bad at their religion because they're so corrupt. No, so the thing here, Max, is like even if I agreed with you that this is overall beneficial, we are still hung up on the fact that what you're describing is only benefit for an authoritarian government. You talk about the state as the whole. There's lots of different kinds of states. There's lots of different kinds of governments and nations out there. What you are describing consistently is like authoritarian, fascistic, like super centralized control and power and conformity. And like, that's what you keep describing. And yes, I continue to agree. That is what religion is really good at. You have yet to convince me that any of this is a good thing, like morally, socially, societally, for people. Yes, it is very good for controlling people. It is very good for fighting wars. It is very good for riling up people into a frenzy and getting them to do stupid things and believe in stupid causes without evidence. It's very good for all of those things. How is it good for humans, for like humanity?
Okay, here I will explain to you. It's not only good for authoritarian regimes. It's good for, Ukraine. I'm saying that, like, my thesis of the previous statement was that had they used the religion to, more, had they, used it to the same level as the Russians, for example, really pushing this idea of how, you go to heaven if you die defending your land, then they would have way more people joining their military and way more resources to defend their nation.
Max, I'm actually getting a little bit upset right now because you're basically calling the tens and thousands of Ukrainians who are on the front lines right now dying for their country cowards, because not everyone is, while they're being invaded by a country that's the largest landmass country in the world, and somehow saying they're not fighting hard enough. I'm sorry, but this is a really upsetting premise to follow, and I think you might want to rephrase, who are the brave people in a case like this? The people who are literally fighting for their own freedom and being invaded by what was believed to be the second most powerful military in the world, and have been doing extraordinarily well against those odds, with no outside troops coming in to actually fight that battle for them, and yet are able to hold their own and even invade into Russia and take Russian territory. That sounds like some pretty amazing stuff from a country that should have failed within the first 2 weeks of the war, but because of the bravery of its leadership and its citizens, that they were able to actually push back and actually have a fighting chance against an alleged nuclear-armed superpower.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because honestly, I've been letting so much stuff slide just to try to get to a point. Like, so much of the gross shit that you've been saying here, Max, I've just been like, okay, just get there. And just like with the last time we talked, we're not getting to a point, because still the whole premise is religion helps people win wars and be fascists. And we're like, yeah, so what? And you're like, no, you don't understand. The fascists are using religion, and they need to do it more. And it's like, no, dude, they fucking don't. What you're saying has no difference between, we're talking about Russia now, same exact thing you can say to the fucking Nazis. God mit uns, God on our side. Same exact thing. And it wasn't good then, and it's not good now, and it's not good ever. I'm trying to ask you, when is it good? Why are you saying that it's beneficial for anybody else besides an authoritarian fascistic government?
Can I respond? First of all, Aaron, I just want to apologize if, maybe I said it confusingly, but I'm on the side of the Ukrainians 100%. What they're doing now is very brave, and the people at the front lines, they're absolutely heroes, and the West should be doing more to support them because they're fighting for their freedom. What I was saying is that the Ukrainians could use their religion to a higher degree to give more troops, give more resources. You talk about the Kiev, the Kursk offensive, and, you're right. It's doing, like, punching above its weight, but also they're running out of people because a lot of their men have just left. They went as refugees to other countries. Because they didn't want to fight.
Go back to the beginning of the call, Max. Go back to the beginning of the call when I asked you, how is religion beneficial, or how does it work out for women and LGBT people? And you were like, oh, it's not good. And like, yeah. So do you think that Ukraine would be better off if they adopted some religious fundamentalism so that they could fight a crazy ass war and then enter into 100 years of regression and oppression and started like seriously oppressing the women and the trans folks and the gay folks in their country and became a horrible, backwards, regressive ass society, but at least they exist? Are you willing to make that sacrifice?
First of all, I would say that that's a misrepresentation of my points. I think it's very possible to do, effective war
just
propaganda.
Stringing different things you've said together.
You're no. Well, I don't feel that way. I feel like you're misrepresenting my point and putting out this straw man. I think it's very possible.
I didn't say you said that.
Okay, well, that's what it seemed like you. Okay, let's move on then. If you didn't say it, cool. What I'm saying now is that Ukraine could definitely use this religion in a positive light to bring the people back, to really set up, a big propaganda machine that would convince the people, not to flee, but to stay and work for the country. And in that particular sense, of course, it would be very useful to bring as many guys back on the front line.
Are there other ways to do that do not risk and people being religiously indoctrinated and then behaving like religiously indoctrinated people tend to do? Are there other ways to do that?
I think Ukraine right now should use every way it can to defend its nation against this attack. And, one way would
because
be
the ends justify the means is rarely a good argument, especially when you're talking about something like this. Max, it's been 16 minutes, man, and we're still here at this point where the whole point is it's beneficial for a government that wants to do war. I agree. It's beneficial for a government that wants to do war. It's not beneficial for people. It's not beneficial for individual people trying to live in a free society. It is the opposite of beneficial to them. It is quite harmful to them. So, I'm not willing to trade. I am not willing to trade security for freedom. I'm just not. I'm not willing to say I will be much less free and much less safe, or much less free and much less happy and much less equal, but at least I'll be safe somehow. That's
okay,
not appropriate or acceptable to me. I don't care, Max. It's been. I'm not here to talk about foreign policy with Ukraine. It's not my issue. About it. I'm level-headed. I've been very calm and polite with you. You've been saying the same thing over and over. You've been saying the same thing for 17 minutes, and we've agreed with it.
You're not addressing
and then
what
you
I'm
keep
saying.
drawing these crazy fucking conclusions out of it and trying to make it this thing about the war in Ukraine now. It's not productive at all.
It's a tool like any other.
It's a shitty tool. A nuke is a tool. It's not an appropriate one. It's not appropriate. It's not useful. That's your argument, and I strongly disagree with it. And I don't have to sit here and detail out a battle plan for Ukraine to win a war in order to strongly disagree with the idea that we should use fascistic, theocratic methods to try to fight a land war in Eastern Europe. It's just not appropriate, nor is it sane. So, Aaron, do you have anything else? Because I'm done.
Max, I think we had a conversation about this as well before. At least I remember a similar one where the idea brought up was kamikazes during World War II. And here we can again point out, here's a country that was beat, even though it had religious fervor in people going and doing this, but also there was cowardice, because actually a lot of the kamikaze pilots who were told to go out and die for their god emperor said, oh, I'm having an injury problem, I got to come back. Because guess what? People don't like to go and do suicide missions, even when they have all this religious fervor behind them. Because guess what? People don't like to just go up and die. And unless you can make war where people don't die, people are going to avoid it no matter what stories we tell them. If you want to actually help people in Ukraine, for example, fight this war, give them the tools that actually will win it, not the stories that will make them potentially do something stupid and will harm them as a society.
They don't have enough people on the front lines. That's the whole point. And it's not about...
And giving them superstition isn't going to make the population increase. It's not going to make the weapons somehow shoot better bullets.
It won't make the weapons shoot better bullets, but it will make more people join the army, more people in the trenches.
And then
also,
kill
since
people
you're bringing up Russia,
horrible reasons.
At the beginning of that war, there were hundreds of thousands of Russians fleeing Russia because they didn't want to get drafted. It's also worth noting, most of the people who are fighting for Russia there are actually either paid or they are drafted. And often they are drafted outside of the actual ethnic Russian population and forcing it more onto the poor, impoverished people further east, who also have a harder time organizing against the forces in Moscow. So this is also a case of Russia itself, a somewhat poor country, taking its worst off, saying, here's an extra $50 to go get yourself possibly a nice better life back home, because we make things so crappy for you here in Russia under Putin's regime, and they're still doing such a shit job, they actually need help from the North Koreans, who also are well known to be not exactly the happiest people in the world.
Yeah, and everything you said is correct. But
so it looks like the Russians are also shit at using religion to this purpose, and instead the reason people are fighting on those front lines is either they are forced to or they are paid to. The almighty dollar is even more powerful than the almighty God in many cases.
Okay, you're right.
It's just
Ukraine does not have those dollars.
I'm just fucking dude. Aaron, it's
so I think we've been going around in circles, and Max, fundamentally, I think you're wrong about religion even being effective to the things you are, and it is divorced from the truth claims of it. So honestly, I think this is kind of an impasse. We need to get to some point and talk about what's real rather than what superstitions can we force onto the populace so that way they can be manipulated. I don't want to be manipulated.
Okay,
I want to get to the truth, and I want to bring as many people as possible to the truth.
That's
you're right.
Really, like the whole is like this entire thing is just a justification for what inevitably always becomes colonialism. Like the things that you are saying here is why fucking manifest destiny happened. That's like I talked about like the LGBT people and women in the population. What happens after that war? It's what happens to the indigenous peoples of other areas and in the other country when they're like, hey, we've used our religion to win this war. Our religion says we should keep going because we have a divine right to this and this and this. Like you keep using this in like the most disgustingly utilitarian way. And bro, I don't get how you can sit well with that and not like just puke. It's so weird. And I'm so
basically what you're saying is that Ukraine should just surrender, right? Because they don't have resources.
Okay, Max.
You don't use religion.
Max. No one has said anything even close to that. And you've been fucking bitching about me straw manning you because I just repeated the two things that you said and strung them together. And now you're going to say that we think Ukraine should surrender after both of us have said that we're adamantly supportive of their cause? Absolutely not. Seriously sit down and think about the consequences of what you're saying and maybe come up with an actual reason for what you believe in before you call back sometime. We're going to move on, Max. I'm so done with him. So done with Max. Talked to Max for almost an hour earlier today. And I can't sit here and listen to this fucking colonial bullshit about like, no, it's okay. Yeah. We just have to make our people, we have to lie to a lot of people so that they kill a lot of other people and then we'll be safe. No.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it, dude. And I guarantee he's going to say them.
As well. Yeah. And two quick things to that. If you are basing your system on something that is not true, that means one, it's going to collapse because the truth will come out, or two, it'll collapse because you have a bad method to getting the truth that someone else can manipulate. If you are dealing with the truth, and that's actual reality, you can't really shake that in the same way that lies shake apart every time you give them a tap on the side.
Mm-hmm. Seriously, and you want to talk about fucking the truth coming out and all these things. That's one of the reasons why we don't have as high a military enrollment anymore, because truth came out about what we were fighting wars over. Like, it's so fucking bad. It's such a terrible argument, and it's given in such bad faith. I just can't deal with it anymore. So forgive me for being a little grumpy about it. I'm just so fucking sick of that shit. It's so gross. We've got lines full of theists, though. While Max was talking, a bunch more people called in. And as I understand it, lines are now closed because we have full lines, and that should last us well past 9 o'clock tonight. Do you have the call screen open?
I do not.
Okay, I was going to ask if you had any in particular that you were interested in. I'll wait for you to, because I picked the last couple.
Yeah, let me pop in. I'm clicking the host show button. Let's see here. So, Canadians, Floridians, New Yorkers. Oh, boy. Caller from India that I definitely want to listen to, but I feel the best of bringing in theists based on their time. And let's bring in Maureen. I think that might be a good one, or one. It's a discussion we need to have.
Yeah, most definitely. So we're going to go for Maureen, pronoun she, her, calling in from Canada, is a theist who has questions about what it means to be trans. Maureen, you are on the line with Forrest and Aaron. How are you doing?
Fine. How are you?
Never had a bad day.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Yeah, first of all, you have to know that I don't understand half the stuff you guys say. You're very well educated and I'm not. So I'm asking basic questions. Huh?
Sure.
No, I love listening to you guys. I'm trying to learn, but you're so much when you get into physics and stuff, I just don't understand none of that. So my question is like the basic definition of male and female. And,
sure.
Like I don't understand why it's not just physical, right? Like if you talk about physical being, okay,
yeah.
Go on.
So no, it's fine. It's fine. So I just want to a couple of things that I think are important. Number one, male and female, that is talking about physical. However, there's still a lot of variation there and there's a lot of layers to it. So like, for example, I right now study biomedical sciences and when we're working in a lab, an anatomy lab, and we're talking about a patient or a cadaver, whatever it may be, we're talking about a human body. We will almost always distinguish, are you talking, like just say male? Are we talking anatomical male, phenotypic male, hormonal male, chromosomal male, genetic male? Like what kind of, because not all of those always link up and not a single one of them necessarily means man, because man is a gendered term. So when we talk about sex, we're talking about male, female, and intersex people. When we talk about gender, we're talking about men, women, and non-binary people. And those things they overlap, but what you can't boil down sex in such a way that is predictive of gender or any kind of reliable thing that will like tell you about gender, because gender is a social thing. So when we're talking about trans people, we're talking about gender, not sex. And when we're talking about intersex people, we're talking about sex, not trans people. There is overlap there. Sometimes you could have a trans and intersex person at the same time, but like that's the main distinction there. And I'd be happy to get into any like details about any of those things if you'd like. Does that answer the initial question though?
Well, yeah, I think it does. I'm thinking I'm understanding it. I guess my basic premise is that we're not just what the physical of us is. So just because you're born physically a male or a female, that doesn't mean that that's what you are inside. And why, if science or, philosophy, everything tells you that there's more to being a person than just what you are physically, does there seem to be such a hatred or a dislike or a fear of people who are saying, I'm not what you think I look like? Like, why are people having such a hard time understanding that? Like, because we're more than just what we look like.
We certainly are. And like what I think, in my experience, I think the biggest hang up is that number one, this is to accept trans people and understand their place in society feels like a very new thing. It isn't actually a new thing. Trans people have been here the whole time. You can find records of trans people all throughout history. There was a Roman emperor who was trans. There was a great French diplomat and spy who was trans that I can think of that I've talked about. Chevalier de Dawn. The Roman emperor was Marcus Aurelius Antonius, I believe. Had a short name that I can't remember, like a nickname. There are trans and non-binary people across like dozens of cultures all around the world, all throughout history. There are newspaper clippings you can find online from here in America from World War II about, this GI is now a lady. This GI, this soldier came home and turned into a girl. How crazy! Isn't she happy? And just a novelty that they published in the paper, everyone was cool with. It's now this thing where it's become politicized the same way that like climate change became politicized. It was well-established science that everybody understood, and then somebody started turning it into a red versus blue issue, and somebody started throwing around words like culture war, and talking about how they're trying to change the fabric of society and spreading all these bullshit rumors about how, like, actually it's always been only man and woman, which, even if you agree to that, doesn't make any sense, because what it means to be a man and a woman, even just in our culture, has changed tremendously over past, a couple hundred years. And so, like, it's just a bunch of people being reactionary and blending sexism and homophobia into the diarrhea martini known as transphobia, and using that to get attention and gain influence, because hate is a great way to get control. That's my breakdown of it.
And fear, right? And fear.
Yeah.
Aren't people like they fear it?
Yeah, absolutely. The word phobia is fear or aversion. And people like to say, I'm not afraid of trans people. But when you listen to the rhetoric coming out of, listen to the Donald Trump campaign right now, he's literally convinced people that children will go to school and get a sex change operation without their parents' permission. Dude, fucking nurses can't give aspirin without parents' permission. You think they're going to lop off somebody's genitals?
Crazy.
Don't even get me started. It's a bad time. Yeah, so like that's kind of where it is. You're absolutely right. It's just ignorance and fear, and it sucks. And so that's kind of where it's at.
Yeah, I guess I believe that if you're if just because you're born in a certain body and you went off and fought war and you come back and you've decided you want a different a body, you want to trans into something else, you're still basically the same person you were. So would the person, maybe this is getting a bit weird, would that person who was born in the male body, thinks they're female or believes they're female, have always been that way? And wouldn't you just recognize that person as the same person? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what we like to say, or the way that I usually phrase it myself, is I wouldn't say they just think that they're a woman. And remember, I'm differentiating here between sex terms and gender terms. So this person is born male, they're anatomically male, chromosomally male, but they were born as a woman, because woman is a gender term. Gender is a social construct. It is what's going on in your brain. It's who you are. Inside is your identity, is a fundamental part of you. And so this person was always a woman. They just might not have realized it yet until a certain point, or they might have been suppressing that, or they might have been told that they're wrong. And you can compare it to, it's not the same thing as sexuality, but you can kind of compare it to that. When you talk about this person was always gay, like they didn't wait just one day at 13 decide, what would be great? Dick. You know what I mean? That never happened. They were always gay. And then at a certain point, they came to terms with it, and they were able to fulfill that part of their life and their destiny, and become a little more true to themselves and live more authentically. And so that's kind of the way that it actually works. That's just me talking about it from my experience with this topic, studying it. If you want a more nuanced answer from actual trans people, we have a whole show on this channel called the Transatlantic Call-In Show. It's on, I believe, Thursdays. And that show is hosted entirely by trans individuals who are willing to take questions like this. And you can actually hear their descriptions of their experiences and what their lives have been. And that might be a great thing for you as well, if you want to call in there as well.
Sure. Yeah, I'll do that then. Can I ask one last question?
By all means, I'm happy to help as long as I can. I just want to make sure that other resources are there for you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You're the person I was talking to before. She mentioned that on Thursday. Yeah. So
nice.
I'm an older person, so a lot of my definitions in that come from, I'm almost 70. So I'm saying that I grew up with the men are men and women are women type of thing. Women are from Venus and Mars stuff and that. But when you look at somebody who's trans, I guess, do you think that we're actually more alike than we're pretending we are? I mean, I think there are basic differences. I think men are more, or male is more aggressive. I think there are differences, but do you think they're that big of a thing, the differences, or are we more the same?
Yeah. So what's important to remember is that what you're describing,
everything in us, I guess.
Yeah. So what you are describing there are social norms. You're talking about gender presentation.
Okay.
You're talking about the way that you behave as a man or a woman. So like, just as an example, like you say, men are men, they're aggressive and all these things, which is, totally, totally compatible with the gender presentation of men that you would experience in your life over the past 70 years. Would you say that it is a very masculine thing to wear a wig, to wear high heels, to cry with emotion, or to faint when you're when you're too excited? Do you think those are very masculine traits?
No, I guess the way I grew up, those are female traits, which I don't like being identified, with those weaknesses. Like,
oh no, you're fine. You're fine. I'm not trying to like trap you in anything. I mean, I'm just saying like.
Yeah, no, I think that you're right. I've got all these definitions in me about what's what and what's not, and I basically I think that whatever a person can be, everybody can be. It's all in everybody, and like I don't know if it's something that comes out in somebody, like you say, at a different time, or I mean, is there a different way of thinking? If you're
the reason why I bring those up is because those were all very masculine traits for men in the 1600s. We wore powdered wigs. Okay. We wore high heels. In the 1600s, men would weep. We weep with emotion. We would faint. We would get excited. We wore makeup. We wore fingernail polish was invented for men. The ancient Babylonian warriors used to paint their fingernails to look more intimidating. Different colors denoted different military ranks. Eyeliner and makeups and things. Pharaohs used to wear heavy eyeliner to show how powerful they were. Like these are all things that were very masculine traits that now we tend to call female or feminine traits. And so it is entirely cultural. And so you looking at the gendered landscape that you live in and saying, is this something that's inherent in us? The fact is, as we live gendered lives, we develop gendered minds and gendered brains and gendered understandings of the world around us and gendered expectations on ourselves and on others. And so as we live in this gendered society, we are then going to tell ourselves how we need to behave in a way that the society and even ourselves subconsciously expect. And so if you're, say, for example, a trans man, you're born phenotypically female, and you at a certain point come to terms with the fact that this whole woman thing just doesn't work for you, the kind of man that you're going to become is largely going to be reflective of the gendered experience and gendered expectations and gendered norms that are in your head.
Oh, okay.
And at that point, then maybe you can start to have some fluctuation in there. Like if you ask me, I'm cisgender. I was born anatomically male. I'm pretty sure I'm chromosomally male as well. I've been a man my whole life. I couldn't tell you, Maureen, what it means to be a man or what manliness is. I don't know. But I know what it feels like to me, and I can explain that. And there are certain things that make me feel more masculine, kinda sometimes. And but I don't really care about feeling feminine too much. It doesn't bother me. I don't know. Maybe I'm non-binary, but I have a job, so it doesn't matter. It's just like that's that whole thing is just to say that, like, if someone is trans, what they are doing is they're wearing their gender and performing their gender the exact same way that you do without even ever thinking about it, because you never have to critically analyze that because you're cisgendered. You never had to care about what it means to be a woman. You just were taught how to do it and you know what it feels like, so you do it. But a trans person actually gets that opportunity to kind of explore that a little bit and to find a way that's more comfortable for them to be a man or a woman as they see fit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So I guess basically I was asking if there's not really any like psychological, or is there something that people are saying that makes one person different from another when it comes to gender? It sounds like there's not. It's just a way that we're acting out socially and culturally, the way we're taught to act. Is that it?
If you want the super detail, pretty much, yeah. It's if you want like the real nitty gritty of it, like you can start to differentiate, and indeed, anthropologists do differentiate between like gender versus gender performance versus gender identity versus like all these different like fundamental parts of it. It's kind of like with just to relate it to sexuality again, because that's something that a little bit more common to talk about. So it might be a little easier to wrap your head around. You know, we talk about sexuality. You're either, you know, gay or straight or whatever like that. The reality is actually a lot more complicated than that. There is your actual like sexual orientation, who you want to have sex with. And then there's a romantic orientation, which is who you're romantically attracted to. And then there's an erotic orientation, which is the stuff that you might, you know, masturbate to, but you certainly don't want to do it in real life. Just things that you find hot that may not be practical. Like these are different concepts. And for a lot of people, they're all the same. They all line up. But there's some times when they don't. And if you sit down to really, really contemplate on your sexuality, you may actually find some differences in there. And that's totally normal. That's everybody has that. But most people don't have to ever think about it. But LGBT people, the gay and lesbian people and asexual people and all these people, they sometimes do have to think about that to understand what to even call themselves. And so to now take it back to gender, it's the exact same thing. There's a difference between like gender identity and gender presentation and the way you perform your gender versus what you feel on the inside. And most of the time, for most people, all those line up and they're synonymous with identical with your sex as well. But there's a lot of people out there where it doesn't click. It's just not the same. And if you sit down and really, really think about your gender and what it means, you may even find that there's some wiggle room in there. And we live in a society that's really, really focused on cisgender heterosexual people and kind of like structured around them. And so the vast majority of people never take the time, or I would say have the opportunity to really explore that about themselves. And so we don't have words for it in like common speech. But for trans people and intersex people, that's something that actually is a really, really serious thing to think about and to talk about and to explore. And so it's a little bit more interesting, a little bit more fun than we previously thought.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I get it. I guess I'm just, you know, the way I grew up with the definitions I grew up with. And I'm always been open-minded though. So it's only, like you said, until recently that I've started to think about how other people are having to put up with, I guess, these prejudices or whatever there are. And it's just because of the way that we grow up. And religion is a part of that. Although my religion, the way I feel about it, I've never thought it was right to just judge anybody based on anything they do. I mean, or what they think they are, or what they are, I should say. Mm-hmm. So maybe I don't know. I do understand that there are religions. I mean, I just hear some of the people talking, and it's always about so judgmental, and I've never had that. But I do believe in a God, so I don't know. That's what I got out of God.
You know what? I really appreciate just what you just did just there, where you said, you know, what people think they are, or I suppose I should say what they are, and that little correction. Because like a lot of people like to pretend like this is some sort of pathology, like this is a mental, like they're just crazy. They just think this and this. And the fact that you at this time in your life are willing to listen to these things and to even correct yourself on little nuanced things like that I think you understand are really important. That is so fucking cool, dude. And so like, I think if you continue talking to more people about this stuff, especially learning from trans people themselves, or you can even talk to more biologists, because this is a hot button issue in the biology world right now. Because even though the information on this stuff is over 100 years old, there's a lot of biologists out there that are pretty resistant to it. And so, like, you know, engross yourself in the discussion a little bit if you'd like. You don't have to. But I think what's most important for you is just to continue talking especially to trans people themselves, and coming to understand like who they are, why they are, what they are. We have a really cool guy on this channel. His name is Dr. Ben. He is a trans man, and he is also a medical doctor. And so he can talk to you a lot about, you know, the medical side of it and a little bit more details about things like that. I'm a biologist, so like I talk about like the definitional side of things, and I've talked at length about differences between sex and gender, and how neither sex nor gender is actually a strict binary the way that a lot of people think that it is. But But the summary of the whole thing is just that humans, it turns out, are a lot more interesting than we thought they were. And especially over the last 10 years, 10 years, especially over the last 100 years, we've been learning about this topic with sex and gender. And we've learned a whole hell of a lot, Maureen. And it's really, really interesting. And also,
I know
the person who, when you said you called in and the lady that you talked to that took your call and screened you and everything and said that you should call into Transatlantic Call-In Show, she is also a trans woman and is one of the hosts of that show.
Yeah, that's what she said. So I will definitely call in or listen to the Thursday show to get more information. I just think you should always be open to everything. I think you should never shut your mind to anything because you don't know what's coming in the future either. Nobody knows what we're going to discover. So it's always amazing to me when people shut themselves down. I hate it when they just look back and say, we got to be like we were back in the 1800s or the 50s or something, you know, like, I don't know. It's just weird to me that people don't look forward. Although I have to say, I'm not as interested in finding out where the beginning of the universe started as you guys seem to be. but you know, I'm open to listening
different strokes
to
for
just
different
about
folks.
anything. Yeah,
different strokes for different folks. Some people are really into wine and stuff, and I don't get that either. It's that's awesome. Maureen, you're great. I really appreciate you calling in and talking to us. This has been a lot of fun.
Well,
you're a really good person,
taking my
and
call.
I really appreciate you calling. Thank you for calling. You're a really cool person, and I hope that you learn more cool stuff. And call us back if you have any other questions about anything, and talk to us about your progress on things as well.
I did call in once, maybe a week ago. I think I talked to Matt, and I forget the other person who was on with him. It was a Sunday show, and that was talking more about how religious things. That was more on the religious thing, and I thought we had a good conversation. So
we're nice people as long as the conversation is good, because we get spicy sometimes. I
never got this. Oh, just because I disagree with somebody on one little tiny issue or one little thing, that doesn't mean you have to hate them or dislike them, or you have to get like, oh, I got to be right and you got to be wrong. I never got that.
Right.
That's just the way I am.
Keep on listening, Maureen. We got 4 calls left on the line. Maybe we'll scream at somebody for you. It'll be all right. Take care, Maureen.
You guys do have patience, though. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Maureen. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
What an awesome person. I'll be honest with you. I did not expect that call to go well. I was so ready to be a dick. I was so ready to be angry. And Maureen just came in with the sweetest heart. It was great.
Sweet Canadian women. It's we can't go wrong.
That was phenomenal. That was phenomenal. I've got a person on my Instagram at this moment who's leaving a boatload of comments about how I'm this evil, woman-hating junk biologist because trans people, blah, 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 something, something. I thought that was her because I've been asking that person to call in, and I was like, here we go. Let's finally have this discussion. No! Turned out to be the nicest person I've talked to all day. We've got 4 other calls left. Do you have one that you like?
I don't have any strong preference. Please fire away as you see fit.
I'm going to go with somebody who calls themselves Mr. Science. Calling in from floating lepidopterans. Talking about butterflies just hovering. Neat. It says a theist, self-identified young Earth creationist, wants to know if abiogenesis has ever been replicated in a lab or if it's based on faith. We got a lot to work with there. Mr. Science, do you have a name that I can call you that's shorter than that? You don't have to give your real name, but that's a lot. How are you? Also,
you can just call me. You just call me Mr. Fauci.
Mr. What?
Salad.
Dr. Fauci.
Dr. Fauci. So I'm going to be real with you. Like, it's who knows what your intentions are, but jumping in with that, it doesn't give me like confidence that this isn't a troll. Like, you know what I mean? Especially calling in to say, has abiogenesis been replicated in a lab or is it just faith? That to me is a big leap. So do do you want to say you're trolling now, or do you want to try to continue? Like, what's going on?
No, let's continue. I'd prefer to use the pseudonym, please. Mr. Science is good.
Sure. Okay. We'll rock with that for the time being. So, your question, has abiogenesis been replicated in a lab, or is it based on faith? You do understand, of course, that that's not a dichotomy. It's not one or the other between those two, right?
Well, I'm asking you about, has abiogenesis has ever been observed? It doesn't need to be in a lab.
No, from start to finish, we have never watched abiogenesis happen in a lab. That does not mean it's based on faith, and you do understand the difference, yeah? Or do you not?
Well, we should dive into that. No, I don't agree, because are you using induction?
So let's then dig into it now. Do you think that you have to see a process from start to finish completely, otherwise it is a faith-based position? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, I don't. No, but I think if you're relying on induction, then it is a faith-based position if you don't believe in God.
So you're talking about inductive reasoning? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah, what basis do you have for inductive reasoning? Because that hasn't been proven.
Inductive reasoning hasn't been proven. So inductive reasoning is just taking a look at the evidence that's there and trying to build a model based on that evidence. What does all this evidence point to? It's different than deduction, which needs a set of predetermined like ideas that you are then like ruling out, deducing from to find the one thing that's left. That doesn't really work when you're starting from scratch and don't have any predetermined possibilities to work off of. That's why science largely is based on inductive reasoning, because it allows us to come up with new ideas based on new evidence that best fits reality. Now, the follow-up to that is that those things then need to be tested, and they need to be like shown to be actual, like they have like testable, predictive, like all these things, falsifiable. Like there's a lot of qualifications that come in to make sure that we're not just making up something ridiculous. That's what we're talking about here with this. Of course, we've never watched life come from non-life, de novo, brand new living thing. That's never happened, no. However, we have observed a lot of the pieces of it happening, and we've done tests to show that a lot of these structures, a lot of these functions that we talk about in abiogenesis are actually reasonable and actually do work. And where we don't know things, we're willing to say we don't know, but we're not willing to fill in the gaps with magic. So that's the big difference between that and faith.
Okay, but are you willing to acknowledge that your position relies on logical induction?
That my position relies on injustice. My position relies on logic. We have this whole model, and we're able to demonstrate most of it, not all in sequence, doesn't need to be in sequence. If you were to break down abiogenesis from like just random elements all the way up to a living cell into like 10 theoretical steps, we would have like, steps 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, and maybe 10. Like that's. And so like we have most of this shit figured out. There's just some gaps in our understanding that we're filling in every day. And that is the same with literally all science. Also like to make that point to show you that this is not just about abiogenesis. That's the way we know anything about anything.
Well, it seems like you're dodging the question about how you know you have induction. Can you just answer that?
How do I know I have induction? Is that what you're asking me?
Yes. Like, how do you know the universe is existent, and how do you know that what you see is going to be? How do you use inductive reasoning? Like, have you heard of David Hume?
I just explained why we use inductive reasoning.
Yeah, but you didn't explain the basis of it. You explained why it's practical. You didn't say what your basis is. Now you actually know that that's true.
I don't think you understand what you're talking about.
So let me just make sure we're on the same foot here.
True. It's just a process.
Here's what I think he's trying to go at. So let me see if I can fix. Mr. Science, are you basically talking about the problem of induction as given by David Hume?
Exactly.
Okay. So what if I told you actually a big chunk of what science is deductive, in that by hypothesis testing, we use Bayesian updating, which is a completely deductive mathematical theorem?
Does abiogenesis fall in that category?
All of science uses Bayesian thinking. Fundamentally, that's what the scientific method is. You have a hypothesis, you go and test it. If the evidence is in favor of the hypothesis versus the contrary, it becomes evidence for the theory and increases probability. That is fundamentally Bayes' theorem. And everyone, at least intuitively, is applying that mathematical formalism to what is scientific thinking. And it is, and Bayes' theorem is deductive mathematics, not inductive.
Okay, so you're saying you could come to the conclusion that evolution is true without using inductive reasoning.
We were talking about abiogenesis, not evolution, weren't we?
Same thing.
Not at all.
Not even close.
It's double fairy tales.
Okay, so in the way that you don't understand either one of them, I guess, yeah, they're the same. But like they're actual, like the reality of them, even if you don't believe they're real, what they are saying and what they are claiming are completely different.
So you guys think you're related to bananas?
Okay, so you don't actually know what you're talking about. This is just a time wasting troll call. You don't know what evolution is.
You think you're related
to bananas. You don't know what abiogenesis is. You don't know what abiogenesis is. You don't know what induction or deductive is. You're just calling to just say that you don't like these ideas.
Yeah, I'm calling you out.
You're not calling me out. You're just
science,
saying
let's actually
words.
talk some interesting science.
Sure.
Forrest, did you see that it was a couple months ago, I think it was in Science, that there was a new estimate for Luca, pushing it to about 4.2 billion years ago.
That's wild. That's wild.
Yeah, so that basically would say once the Earth formed, it was cool enough to actually have any water on the surface. Life was like, yep, I'm going to hang out here, which is pretty amazing.
That's a little sooner than I thought it was. And that would be immediately at the end of the Hadean bombardment. So like as quickly as, but I thought it took he hung up. I thought
was going to bring this up as well
yes.
because the way they determine Luca is based actually on DNA and mathematical modeling and creating phylogenetic trees that way, and basically going, well, how far back do we need to go until this tree comes back to a somewhat singular point? And it's like, hey, that's completely deductive, or at least it is using deductive probabilistic work. And I have not been able to check the results myself, and I don't know enough DNA analysis to even say what they could have even possibly done wrong. I can barely spell DNA. But nonetheless, that's the current conclusion from that work. And it's damn awesome if it holds up.
That's fucking neat. Yeah, the dude just had not. What's frustrating about calls like that is that like very clearly this guy has just heard some things from his preacher and now wants to say those words to me as well. And like, it would be cool, Mr. Science, if you'd like to call back in and actually talk science sometime. We're happy. I would be happy if you want to call back in, especially when I'm on Skeptalk tomorrow, and actually talk about what evolution and abiogenesis actually are. We can get there, but you're going to have to actually engage with thinking, and that might be a new thing for you. We've got 2 calls left. Man, I don't know what's going on with this one. I'm looking at line number 6 here, from Illinois.
Mm-hmm. I can't. I really can't make heads or tails of that.
Oh,
question,
I misspelled. I misspelled. It's supposed to be wants to know why atheism didn't work for him.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
Yep.
Kyle,
it's just a spelling error.
Okay, cool. Kyle from Illinois wants to know why the atheist didn't work for him. It's actually why the atheism didn't work for him. I thought this dude had a shitty job interview and like some atheist refused. Let's talk to Kyle. Kyle, you're on the line with Forrest and Aaron. How are you doing?
What up?
Hello. How are you?
Good evening.
And well, I'm sure you remember me.
I was wondering. This is you're the one. You were a theist for a while, and then you told us that you were dropping all that, and now you're calling back as a theist, and you're saying the atheism didn't work for you. What happened?
Man, well, some things that you said got me questioning on the other side. Obviously, I love you guys, so I don't want to argue. But you had said whenever I called you, and you said whenever before we ended the call with you and Aaron, that if he just told me things that I would believe him, and then that kind of got me feeling a little gullible with just taking your word for everything. So that's really what started my journey on the journey back to theism.
Okay, so I think it's good for you to not just take our word for everything. Like you shouldn't do that with anybody. So like, what happened to convince you that theism is that a God exists? Like, which God do you believe in, first of all?
The Jesus Christ God.
Okay, so you're going back to Christianity. I don't remember the details of all of our calls, but like, why? If it sounds to me like what you're saying is that you didn't want to just believe us just to believe us, so you decided to just believe something else to just believe that. Like, you should not just believe us just because we said anything. Like, you should fact check us. But like, what are you doing over here now to where like this seems more reasonable? What's going on?
Because I know that the God thing cannot be proven or disproven, and I feel like it does take just accepting experiences and is it true that scientific proof is not proof in and of itself?
So the way that maybe Aaron will have a different way of saying this, but like the way that I like to say it is that all models are wrong, all theories are wrong, some of them are useful. So forgive me if I've already said this to you. I don't know, I can't remember, but like the Earth is what the Earth looks like. Every single map is wrong. Even the most amazing map that we have with satellite images and shit, the resolution's bad, the coastlines make no sense. Like, excuse me, real burpish. There's a lot of problems with every single map. Every map is an issue. But you want to use a map to understand certain things about the surface of the planet. Similarly, every scientific theory and model that we have is just a reflection of reality. Reality is what reality looks like. And all we're doing is gathering data and putting it together in a model. And if that model is testable and predictive and functional, then we can say, all right, this is probably pretty close to what reality looks like. And if we want to learn about reality, this is a good description of it, just like a map is a good description of Earth. So it's in science, you'll hear anybody say that anything's ever been proven. Because that is to say that we have all the evidence necessary, we have all the answers, we have all the information we could possibly need, and there's no way we could ever be wrong. And that makes no sense. We could always be wrong. There could always be something that comes up. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Now, and then the second part is like, before I started calling the show, I was willing to accept it as a whole. I feel like when I started calling the show, I turned into a cherry picking asshole to people, man. Like, I feel like I'm an extremist no matter which way I go. And I don't know. It's just like, I'm going to either be cherry picking because, you know, people will try to share their faith with you. And then you guys say, well, don't you know the Old Testament talks about fucking this and that and how God is a monster and all this stuff.
But only if somebody's saying that the Bible is literally true. If somebody's calling in to say the Bible is actually literally true and the God of the Bible is good, well, those two things are incompatible. If the God of the Bible is real, then the God of the Bible is not good. And so it's not cherry picking. That's like, you know, if we're talking about, like, you know, talk about Hitler. Oh, Hitler built some bridges. Hitler got a lot of medals for like community service. Hitler did a lot of good infrastructure work in his community. But we can still say, like, oh, also there was the whole Holocaust thing. He's a dick, right? That's not cherry picking. That's just taking the whole story together. And it's the same thing with the Bible. You're not cherry picking by saying, hey, here's some issues. It would be cherry picking for you to go through the Bible and find one verse where Jesus said, love your neighbor, and say, okay, this is now a good book. That would be cherry picking.
Okay. Now, wouldn't it be cherry picking to also be like, well, it says this, so therefore he's not good?
If he does something sufficiently evil, then yeah, you can kind of paint his whole character as evil. So like, if
at the very least, the idea that God is all good would be incompatible with anything not good in the Holy Book.
Truth. Truth. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's a major thing. But to call God actually bad, like then you would need something really extreme. Like if, for example, he were to have flooded the whole world, that's a pretty bad thing to do. And so like to to paint somebody's whole character as bad, then yeah, you'd have to find something sufficiently bad. And I think that there are several parts of the Bible that paint him as sufficiently bad, especially when taken as a whole. So it sounds to me like, just from what you're saying, and maybe you have something else to say, and I don't want to cut you off, but like it sounds to me like somebody else talked to you about this and kind of persuaded you back in the other direction. Is that what's happening? Or did you just think it out a little bit more and didn't like where you were?
Now I have been talking to people because I try to keep an open mind.
Sure.
Whether I practice Christianity or not, I'm going to try to be the best version of myself I can be, if that makes sense.
That's good.
And man, it's just like transgender. We don't know what's coming after this life. It could be nothing. It could be something. I'm not the one to fucking judge what people want to do in life. You know what I mean? So
you were listening to that last call, Maureen.
Yes, I felt that so strongly, man. Relatable, and I feel like you can come to the conclusion that the message of what the Bible would call the gospel is a message of love in and of itself, and I just feel like, man, I had a hope, I had a meaning, I had a purpose, and you know, if that makes me satisfied in life, I kind of look at it, how wrong can it really be in that sense?
Sure.
If you're not looking for proof and stuff, and
yeah,
and I don't have the. And just add in, I don't have the brain that you guys have to even dive in full force with atheism.
I don't think it takes a lot of, like, it's not a brain thing. Like Aaron and I are scientists, so we care about. But like, just to be an atheist, it just means that you don't believe in a God claim, and so like doesn't take anything beyond just incredulity. So like, here's the thing, man, is that like the reason why I'm so anti-religion, one of the reasons, is because if somebody can make you believe absurdities, they can make you commit atrocities. So I care about what you believe, even if it's just something super benign that you don't like, you're not hurting anybody. It's just your personal belief that gives your life some meaning and things. I still say that it's super risky and not worth it. And it still harms you as an individual, especially the teachings of Christianity, I think really, really destroy someone's self-esteem and someone's self-worth and someone's understanding of love and justice. I think that these teachings are incompatible with all of those things. So like, that's why I care about those things. Yeah. Oh God. Yeah, dude. And so like, that's why I care about those things for you. And on top of that, I care that it's not real. So like, while I can totally understand what you're saying, like, it doesn't really matter if it's real or not. It matters if it does something for me. What I want to impress upon you is just that, like, whether or not it is meaningful, whether or not it is useful, whether or not it gives you hope or helps you sleep at night, whether or not it helps someone out of a shitty situation, whether or not it holds society together, like, none of these things make it true. And if you don't care about whether or not what you believe is true, that's fine. That's a totally different conversation. I still think what you're believing is harmful. And so that's where I'm coming from for you. And if you don't see it that way, that's okay. That's kind of where I'm at now with this. I want to understand where you're at,
For sure. I just wanted to call because I don't know. I was kind of back and forth there for a little bit.
Well, you know what? A lot of people who are deconstructing their religion will flip-flop quite a lot in there. And it doesn't, who knows what side you're going to land on. You may, in the next few weeks, decide you're an atheist again, and then decide you're a theist again. And who knows how many times that'll go. And if these are new ideas to you, it may be a type of thing where you're kind of pulled back and forth depending on whether you're watching us or you're watching, whatever creationist or preacher or whatever like that. And okay, well, that's actually a good argument. And I'm not saying you're gullible. I'm saying that like you hear a good argument and you're like, fuck, man, I got to grapple with that. Maybe I should call myself this for a minute. And then you hear another good argument from the other side and you're like, fuck, I got to go think about this for a while. That's all totally normal.
Yeah.
But like,
now, can I ask you something? I heard Christopher Hitchens say in his last interview.
Yeah.
I feel like whenever, if you really do know your time is about to go, you really do start to think about things. And he had said something if there is a God, I hope that he would look at the condition of my heart. If there is a God, I'm just like, man, and then that's where I come to mind that it really does just change things whenever you really do have a deathbed that your time is coming.
That's why I try to think about death. One of the many reasons why I think about death quite a bit. I try to remember my death at all times, because I don't want to be caught off guard when it comes. I want to have the time now in my life to really think about what's important and where I'm at, and like what good am I doing in the world, and also to make sure that I have time to grieve and fear my own loss, so that when that time comes, it's not so traumatic. And like, I remember Hitchens also said, he was saying, like, I hope that no one holds it against me if out of fear or pain at the very end, I decide I'm a Christian all of a sudden, because I'm just so scared or in so much pain or so whatever, that because that's when people do it sometimes. And so like,
can I ask?
That's
okay.
I was just gonna say that's what I value more, is that when he was the most himself, when he was really thinking clearly and was as comfortable as he could have been in his final days, that's what he wanted people to think about him, is that, like, even if I relent in the very end, please understand it's not me talking. It's the fear, it's the pain, it's something else. Who he really is at his core is somebody who is recalcitrant to the very end. And that's who I want to be too,
Yeah. Now, do you have kids?
No.
Okay. All right. Then I was just gonna ask a curiosity question.
I don't, but I know what I can do a thought experiment with you about it if you want to ask one. Like, if you have a curiosity question.
Yeah, if you had kids grown up and they on their own, because you obviously would not push any God on them, if they came to you and was like, "Hey, I experienced this and I think it's God," would you try to deter them from it?
I would ask, so I don't have children, but my wife used to be Christian. And I love her very much. And so, like, I can kind of relate a little bit.
Gotcha.
I would give them the respect to talk it out and say, okay, I need you to actually convince me that this is real, because people have what they believe to be supernatural experiences all the time, and they're not supernatural in the end of the day. And confirmation bias exists, and here's all these logical fallacies that exist that you might not know you're committing. And also, even if you can prove to me that you have no explanation, I don't know isn't the same as magic. You have to actually positively prove to me that this is a magical thing. I would give them the same amount of respect that I give you, Kyle, in terms of, like, not treating you like you're stupid and saying, "Oh, well, yeah, maybe. Who knows? It's magic. Hooray!" I would ask you to tell me about it, prove it to me, and convince me, and meet me as an equal, not as somebody who's gonna, like, placate you and then talk shit behind your back.
Yeah. Now, it seems like every guest or every host on the show has a different definition for faith. Is there like a baseline definition for what faith is?
I don't.
That everybody agrees on.
I don't.
Oh, definitely not
know,
that.
There's,
especially when you say everybody, because, well, first off, in general, definitions are difficult, to put it mildly. We were having that point as well earlier, where we were talking about like the definition of religion, or the definition of men and women, or things like that. You realize, hey, these are just groupings that kind of sort of go together in what we have put together culturally, and realize there's a lot of edge cases or a lot of things that we realize it's just kind of a cobbled together category. And when it comes to the word faith, because it has a connotation that some believers don't like, because it makes it sound like they're gullible or unreasonable, they definitely don't like to say faith as if it's like, oh, I'm believing something despite the evidence or against the evidence because that sounds irrational, that they want to say the faith is reasonable. And then when you ask what that is, how is it actually different than just normal, reason-based thinking? It's unclear. So it gets even harder when people say, well, it means this in some context, but the way I use it can't have that negative context, so it can't mean the bad thing.
Right. Yeah, I like the description of faith as just belief without evidence or in spite of evidence. I think that's fine. But I also understand there are colloquial definitions about just like, like belief in what you're about to do or in the outcome of a scenario that you haven't seen yet, belief in things unseen, belief in Martin Luther King said faith is taking the first step before you see the whole staircase or something like that. I know for sure that like religion doesn't have a solid definition. But that is to say, these things do have colloquial definitions. They have ways that we use them in common parlance that you and I would know what we're talking about. And I think that's good enough for me. I don't know.
I got you. I guess just at the end of the day, that I guess you can call it a personal experience. I've just accepted it that it is a something that I can't explain, and I feel like we call that God. And I just feel like I'm a better person. And I guess you could call it religion, with God, or whatever you want to call it.
Okay. If you're a better person with it, what is it about it that makes you better?
Because it allows me to uplift people. It might not give me an explanation for everything, but it does give me an answer for everything. And I won't say it makes me comfortable because, sharing the whole Jesus died for you, he rose again, and all of that is an uncomfortable message to spread.
I think it's a very cool one to spread.
What'd you tell her to each their own on the you guys trying to always figure out the beginning of the universe?
Yeah.
Kind of. That's how I look at that.
Sure, but like even the I think what you're describing here is the power of placebo. Like it is very comforting to have an answer, even if it's not the right answer. And like I guess the biggest thing for me, Kyle, is like you don't have to care about science and you don't have to care about the beginning of the universe and anything like that. Do you care whether or not what you believe is true?
Now, what if I say that yes, I care, but I also do feel like I have enough personal evidence to say that it is true?
That's fine. If that's your answer, then that's fine. Then my next question is the evidence that you have for this belief in Christianity, is it the same kind of evidence that you would be able to accept any other thing for? Like if I were to come to you with talking about, pick your favorite, Big Bang, evolution, abiogenesis, whatever, and give you the same kind of evidence that you're giving me for Christianity or that has convinced you of Christianity, would that be good enough for you to believe those things?
Now you said, would the evidence that I have for this be enough for me to believe anything else, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
I guess that would depend on the topic.
Okay, that should be an issue for you. Like that's you started this call talking about how you didn't want to be gullible and you didn't want to just believe anything that just somebody just said to you. That's what you're doing, is believing just anything that you want. If you care about whether or not things are true, you should care about having evidence for them, and that evidence should be something that's like empirical.
Right, but if you count personal experience as evidence, that does hold some value on a personal level.
Sure, in some way, yeah, but it's the caliber of the. I guess let me rephrase it this way. I'll agree with what you said. Depending on what you're talking about, different levels of evidence could be a thing. If I told you that I like pineapple on pizza, I don't need to sit down and eat a whole pie in front of you to prove it to you. You can take that as a thing based on personal experience from me. You know what I mean? If I tell you that the moon is a spaceship run by gophers, you should want more than me saying I saw something on the moon that looked a lot like a gopher and it kind of just felt that way, right? Like it shouldn't, that you would need some serious evidence for it. So what you're talking about here isn't just a preference. You're talking about a scientific claim about the nature of the universe, about souls, about eternal damnation, about a human sacrifice 2,000 years ago that created a contract written in divine blood to which all people are bound. That's a lot of shit, Kyle. That's a lot of claims to make based on I feel it or I had a personal experience.
But you're
and
also
you do also want to
willing
balance that, Kyle, with the other flip side of that. Your personal experience is contrary to the personal experience of billions of other people. So the same kind of evidence, opposite conclusion, that should at least make you think that that kind of evidence ought not to be persuasive, because it would make you flip every single person you talk to who has a very different kind of experience about these things.
Yeah.
Okay, now you guys will never make the claim that the resurrection never happened, right?
That it never happened?
Yeah, you guys will not make that claim that it never happened, right?
I will make the claim that I have no good reason to believe it ever did. So, like, I don't...
Would you ever say that...
I don't like... I would say it's difficult because, like, yeah, I probably would say that didn't happen, but I'm not saying, like, for sure I was there and I measured it. And so, in the same way, I would never say, you know, I don't know, pick your favorite. Abraham Lincoln actually wasn't assassinated, and he moved to Colombia and started a Coca-Cola farm or something. You know, I don't know. Like, those are things that would require a lot of evidence, and I have evidence in the contrary. So, like, did that happen? I'm going to say no, but in the same way that I would speak in scientific terms, there's no for sure definite answer. I could always be wrong, but everything is pointing in this one direction. So similarly with that, maybe some guy actually rose from the dead after 3 days, but I have no reason to believe that's true. I have plenty of evidence to say that that sort of thing is impossible and never happens ever. So there's that. And also, even if you were to prove to me that he did actually raise from the dead, that doesn't tell me anything about whether or not he's the son of a god, or if there is a god to be a son of, or if he healed the blind, or made the cripple walk, or walked on water, or any of the other, turned water to wine. All of those things require their own independent evidence for every single one of those claims. So, like, that's what I would say no, but I don't want you to take it as me just saying absolutely not, no, not ever possible, no. It's so unbelievably tiny of a chance, so ridiculously improbable, it makes no sense to believe it, is what I would say. But that's really fucking pedantic and shitty to say.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say it that way.
And if I can throw some New Testament study stuff on top of that, because I call myself an advanced dilettante when it comes to biblical studies.
Nice words.
First off, I try. So first off, prior probability that person comes back from the dead. So there's been about 100 billion humans. They've all stayed dead. So prior probability that a given human comes back from the dead is already 1 in 100 billion, which is way lower chances of winning several lotteries. So that's already low prior. So you're going to need not just evidence, you're going to need amazing evidence. You're going to need damn good evidence. You're going to need literal Jesus Christ coming down from the sky, slapping in the face and telling me, of course I came back from the dead. I'm right in front of you, dog. And he has to say it exactly that way. He has to say dog, just like that. Now, in reality, what's the evidence we have? Stories that come decades later, and our earliest source only got to know Jesus by having visions. And when he talks about his visions, we can tell that ultimately he's not touching reality, because he talks about going up to the third heaven and being in paradise there. And we know the structure of outer space, and it's not filled with gardens, as Paul was describing in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. So our earliest source for Jesus is a guy who had visions, and he had visions about things that we know are not true. So that really should take away the probability that this is going to be a cult that's giving us hard facts about what happened in roughly 33 AD. And if you want to talk even more stuff when it comes to what we can and can't say about Jesus, or if there even was historical Jesus, that would probably have to be its own separate call.
Okay, now what do you guys make of like the Dead Sea Scrolls and all that? All of that.
They're the oldest scraps of the Old Testament that we have access to. They're still centuries, if not a millennia, after some of the stories that are in there. So, like the oldest scraps from the Dead Sea Scrolls is 2nd century BC. Maybe some of it goes to 3rd century, but the Exodus story, roughly, well, depending on what numbers you use, it's either in the 13th century BC or the 16th century BC. The numbers are kind of messed up, but nonetheless, that's 1,000 years or more further back in time than the oldest scrap of any version of the Exodus story in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So they don't really tell us that much. Now, conversely, they claim that, the Dead Sea Scrolls show that the Bible has been miraculously preserved, that there is like no difference between what we see in the Dead Sea Scrolls and we see 1,000 years later in the Masoretic text. That's actually complete BS. There are thousands of differences between those various manuscripts, and we even see rewritings of the stories from Genesis and elsewhere. So basically, we see a lot of changes, a whole lot of changes. I was just looking at this the other day because I'm a weirdo. I was looking at the book of Jeremiah, who's supposed to be this collection of prophecies from Jeremiah, and there are all these layers of redaction that have happened to it. There's like, all right, so here are the things that were inserted by the same person who wrote Deuteronomy and what's called the Deuteronostic history. So Joshua, Judges, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Samuel. That's all basically like one group of scribes usually ascribed to, or at least the final redactors of that. They also seem to have gone into Jeremiah and said, he should have said this too. And then we also see there's big differences between the oldest Greek copies we have and the version we see in Hebrew, where the Hebrew in a lot of places is a whole lot longer, sometimes like 30% more material in the Hebrew than in the Greek. So it's like, hey, there's all sorts of additions to a book of prophecies. So what actually goes back to the original Jeremiah is, at least somewhat debatable. And that's just the stuff we can actually detect because we have the manuscript evidence. It's what we would call, at best, a mess.
Yeah. I think life's a mess. But I will go ahead and let you guys go. I just want to end it by saying I want to thank you for helping me get all the questions out of my system. I no longer believe out of fear. I believe by choice. So I do appreciate you and that deconstruction part of my journey.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Kyle. And like, the fact of the matter is, I still think that your beliefs are wrong. And I think that they are hurting you and could potentially hurt others. And so I hope you don't have to, I'm never going to force you to, but I hope you call in and talk to us about why you believe what you believe now. And see if we can't, find some ground. And just to revisit what we said at the beginning of the call, like, I hope you don't ever believe anything that Aaron and I or anybody else says just because we said it. I hope we never made you feel gullible. I think you believed when we first spoke for the same reason that millions of people believe. And now you believe for reasons that a lot fewer people believe, which is cooler, but still not acceptable to me anyway. So I think personally that deconstructing fully and getting rid of these beliefs, I think it would leave you better off, although it would be a difficult journey. And it sounds like you're taking a more comfortable path for something that you think is a better outcome. And I'm not going to shame you for that. But I do think that if you want to, I think you could go a lot farther with it and be a lot happier in the long run. And I am always going to be here to help get you there if you want.
Well, I appreciate you.
I appreciate you, Kyle. Have an awesome rest of your day, man, and be well.
Have a good night, guys.
Take care.
Good night, Kyle.
Well, that makes me sad. Kyle's a really nice guy, and we thought we but at the end of the day, like I said at the beginning, like, what Kyle's doing right now is totally normal. It happens a lot when people become atheists. They sometimes go back to original belief for different reasons because it's more comfortable to be there. And as much as that sucks, Kyle's a good person, and I'm happy he's around, and I hope someday we can convince him. We got one
just
call
two
left.
Calls. We'll get him in 2 calls.
Yeah, in 2 calls. Yes, we just have to convince him to believe us, no matter what. We got 1 call left for the end of the night, and then I am going to get some writing done before I've got so much crap to do. And that call is Rob, who specifically called to speak to me. Says wants to talk to Forrest. Wants to talk about Forrest's atheism. Your worldview has problems and needs to be corrected. A theistic model works better. I have a sinking suspicion that Aaron, you and I actually will share a lot of worldview and things here. So I don't think this call has to be all about me, but I'm here for it if there's a reason. Rob, you're on the line with Forrest and Aaron. What are you talking about? What's going on?
Hi, how's it going? Good evening. I wanted to talk just about, just maybe understanding a few basic things that I'm not completely sure about in terms of how you define certain things. So, a lot of times I hear the question, what's the evidence? Provide the evidence. When you hear or when you say what is the evidence for God's existence and so forth, what exactly do you mean by evidence? I just want to understand, so before I strawman anything that you actually opine.
So for me, I'm usually referring to, when I say that, it's just kind of like a simplified way of saying something empirical, like something that is actually gathered through sense data, through experimentation, that we can actually observe, that is preferably testable, repeatable, predictive, preferably in some way or another, because not all things are going to hold up to that, but like at least has some components that are predictive and are testable, and that we can rule out other hypotheses, other explanations that actually affirmatively point to the existence of some guy that made the universe. That's what I'm the long and short of what I'm talking about there.
Okay, so then in terms...
My quick thing for that is evidence is basically, it's something that you would see is more probable on your hypothesis than any other thing. That's the only way something is evidence for a given hypothesis. It's more probable to be seen on that hypothesis versus any other competing version.
You're saying,
okay, and how do you...
than me, you son of a bitch.
And how do you categorize and classify a logical fallacy? Because a lot of times when the question is asked, where's your evidence? The evidence is provided, but it's categorized as, oh, that's a logical fallacy. I want to understand what you mean when you say it's a logical fallacy. Does that mean it automatically has no credence? It automatically has no value? It's not evidence? What do you mean exactly when you say it's a logical fallacy?
All right, so for caution, we should note that there's actually 2 broad categories of logical fallacies, formal and informal. Formal basically means it breaks the laws of logic. So the conclusion can't follow from the premises, or at least you can't say the conclusion is true based on the premises because the argument is misformed. Then there are the informal ones, which aren't necessarily like in a bad logical form, but we realize that they aren't so reliable. So for example, we'll say like the argument from authority is a logical fallacy in that if you go and you heard it from one guy and he said, well, he's an authority on this and that's why we should believe him, that may not be sufficient given other background things. Like, okay, that person might be an expert, but there's also 30 other experts that disagree with them, as an example.
Right.
So that's where it becomes fallacious, when it leaves out important other information that would make you realize the conclusion ought not to follow. So depending on what evidence you're providing, it might be either a formal or informal fallacy that could be being provided, but it's a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I actually just went and grabbed, this is my undergrad psych textbook, which actually has like a whole chunk about what logical fallacies are and like defining them, because I think the point that you're trying to make, what it sounds like anyway, is that like the evidence given is written off as a logical fallacy, and that's just a thing that atheists say to get away from evidence. But I want to show you there are defined, clearly laid out, these are what the fallacies are that we are talking about. The emotional reasoning fallacy. So like talking about using your emotions as a guideline rather than actually having empirical evidence. Bandwagon fallacy. lots of people believe this, therefore it's more likely to be true. Either or fallacy, the idea that something can either be true in one of two extreme circumstances. Either evolution is true or biblical creation is true. That's a logical fallacy. Appeal to authority, what Aaron was just talking about. This really important guy said it, therefore it's true. The genetic fallacy, argument from antiquity, argument from adverse consequences, appeal to ignorance, unnaturalistic, hasty generalization, circular reasoning. Like, these are logical fallacies, and we actually can identify them and hammer them out. And so it's not just applying to these claims from creationists or from theists or whatever. These are the ways that you should be careful to not make these arguments ever for any reason.
Okay, but see, here's the problem, right? You're claiming this makes it either weak evidence or not strong evidence or not sufficient evidence or whatever the case is. The problem is that to many people, it is actually evidence. And even though you call it a logical fallacy, that doesn't automatically mean it is false, right? And I think that is also, actually, that's a logical fallacy
Rob,
to say that.
What you are actually describing there is actually called the fallacy. So yes, if there is a fallacy, that does not mean that the argument is wrong. But if you are having a fallacy, if something is fallacious in your reasoning, it means we cannot get to saying the conclusion is true or even more probably true. We can only get there by sound logical reasoning.
Right, but you see what you're saying is that it's, and then this is why sometimes theists and atheists talk past each other, is because the theist is saying this is a part of an evidence, or this is some evidence that helps me to get to the conclusion that God exists. We're not saying that it is proof. We're not saying that it is absolutely the infallible or the only way to come to that truth, but a corpus of evidences. And some of them may be logical fallacies, but logical fallacy is something that an individual put together and categorized it and said, well, this is a set of arguments that we can say could lead to the truth, could lead to falsehood. But that doesn't mean it's absolutely not evidence and not true. And that's why I think we have
that's a problem. If it is fallacious, then it cannot be evidence. So, and you can't just say, well, I have a lot of arguments. Maybe some of them are actually good. It's like, no, let's actually pare down to the arguments that are worthwhile. Not only are you wasting your time, but if you use bad arguments, you will be guaranteeing that you will get to bad conclusions. Unless you have a good epistemology,
how do you come to that? How do you come to that?
Be a reasonable person.
Right. That's the problem that I'm having is that, Rob, you're talking about, like, hold on, you're talking about saying, like, you know, these people are giving you an argument, and yeah, maybe that argument is fallacious, but they could have other ones. The problem is all we ever hear are the fallacious ones. If there's a good argument for a God, we haven't heard it yet. And like, we've been having this argument for a long time. You know, I've only been doing this show for a couple of years, but like, holy crap, this is not the first time that atheists and Christians have ever done battle. So like, we're waiting for any argument that isn't fallacious, and we've yet to encounter one. So like, just saying
every argument that I was just going to say, every argument that you're claiming as fallacious, you throw it out. It's not something that is logically sound. It doesn't have
a
strong position. I think that's subjective. I don't think that is empirically
No, the whole point
true.
of logic is that it is objective. We have, for example, in modus ponens, P, if P, then Q. P, therefore Q. Any argument that follows that structure is logically valid. And if the premises are true, then the conclusion must follow.
Deductive. But that's
deductive.
We're talking about
that kind of form, then you have made a logical fallacy. So that's an example. If you have a fallacious argument, we should not believe it. If you have a sound argument, then it should actually move us in the direction towards your conclusion. But if you're saying all you have are fallacious arguments, maybe you want to back up and say, why is it that I only have fallacies to justify myself?
Right.
No, actually, the problem is actually on your side, because you're saying that if it is a fallacious argument, then I should not. You didn't say, maybe it's true, maybe it's false. You said I should not believe, which means that you're already concluding that it is false. And that is a logical fallacy in and of itself.
There is a difference. There is a difference between saying I don't believe something and saying something is false. That's the key. I'm not saying there is absolutely no God. I'm saying I don't believe you when you say that there is a God. And until you give me a good, non-fallacious reason to believe in it, I'm still not going to believe you. And that is what you, Rob, it do or should be doing with literally everything all the time. You can't just say they might have an argument that isn't bullshit someday, so I'm just going to go ahead and believe what they're saying just in case. That's a ridiculous thing.
And this is why I don't think the theists and the atheists will ever really come to terms with each other, and we'll never be able to provide a skeptical worldview with what they're looking for. Because when you're coming from skepticism, you're automatically in the position that you can never be certain about anything. If you can never be absolutely certain about anything, how do you even know if you're going in the right direction? And if I'm not mistaken, the two of you, maybe the two of you, maybe one of you, I don't remember exactly, but one or two of you used to be Christian, and you were sure about your Christianity, you were sure about your God, you were sure about what you believed, and then you came to know and understand something different. So how can you even be sure that you're leading your life in a direction that is towards the truth, closer to accuracy, closer to being... how can you be sure about that if you're coming from a skeptical perspective, which from my perspective, from my viewpoint, anyone who's a skeptic really shouldn't be followed, because they're not actually seeking truth. You're seeking some closeness, but you don't know for sure. You're not even sure where the target is.
A person who changed their mind on evidence as not seeking the truth. And that is so much the opposite of anything you just said. I think you need to stop and realize what you basically said is dogmatism is truth. And that can only be established by firmly saying, I will commit every fallacy it takes to stay where I am. I will not seek the truth. I will never change my mind. I, on the other hand, will say, show me the evidence and I will change my mind. How can you say I'm the one not following the truth if I'm the one who's saying I'm open to being changed?
But if you're a skeptic, that means you can never be upon that 100%. Right. So if you can always change your mind, then
you're willing. It means you're willing to change your mind given better evidence. It doesn't mean that you're admitting that you're wrong about everything. It means you're willing to change your mind. And if you're going to sit here and say skeptics shouldn't be followed because they're willing to change their mind, what's the alternative you're proposing? A gullible person? Someone who says, I believe this just because I heard the first thing somebody said? That's so much worse than even the straw man that you're putting up about what skepticism is.
No, actually, we agree. We agree. Both of us agree in our worldviews that you should always update your evidence, update your beliefs based on new evidence. I agree 100%.
That's skepticism.
No one's saying that you shouldn't.
That's skepticism.
But it's not. Well, maybe according to the worldview that you hold, but the worldview that I hold is theistic, and the theistic worldview does definitely have that as a precept, is that you update your information based on whatever, or your beliefs based on whatever new information comes, and that's perfectly in line.
So then what? So then what information do we have about a God that isn't based in logical fallacies?
Well, so that's the thing. It is always going to be, it's not going to be empirical that we're looking for empirical
and you have no
data, because that's what the first thing you said in the beginning was evidence.
You basically just said you have no evidence.
Yeah.
No, I didn't say that.
Let me ask you this question.
You said you have nothing empirical.
Yeah, no, but that's how you. But the thing is, that's how you're defining evidence. I don't define evidence like that, and that's the point. Is we don't define evidence the same.
Let me ask you a couple questions. You said when you were talking about, like, just a minute ago, you were talking about somebody might not have any evidence that isn't a logical fallacy, and yet that doesn't necessarily mean what they're saying isn't true, right?
I'm saying a logical fallacy is evident. It can be evidence. That's what I'm saying. That anything that you categorize as a logical fallacy can still be evidence. There are logical fallacies that point to something that is actually factual. That doesn't mean that it is automatically false. That's what I'm saying.
Right. So there can people can believe in something that is actually true for bad reasons and not have good evidence to present for it, even though the thing is actually true. Do we agree on that?
No, because you're defining it as bad. And I don't agree. That's why I said I don't agree with what your definition of evidence is. And logical fallacies, you're automatically claiming that they're...
Let me try it this way.
Let me try this. Have you ever heard of a Gettier problem?
Gettier problem? No, I haven't.
Okay. It's a problem that exists in the definition of knowledge itself. So the traditional definition for a long time in philosophy is knowledge is justified true belief. And Gettier, I think John Gettier wrote this paper.
I don't agree with that.
Well,
I don't agree with that definition because that's a circular definition. So justified, true belief, justified, and true. If we're talking about what is factual, what is truth, well, it's circular. So you're saying the same thing.
Yeah, I also don't agree with that
Here's
definition.
the
That
thing.
wasn't
Knowledge
the point that
has
he
to
was
be
getting to.
true, so it should have the premise of being truth in it, so it's not circular. And justified means you actually have a reason to actually believe it, that you don't just happen to believe something randomly that happens to be true. If I flip a coin and I say it's heads, and I happen to be right, is it because I actually knew it was going to be heads, or did I make a lucky guess? That's where the justification part is to come in. Like, I have this amazing simulator, or I actually already saw the coin, so I already saw it was heads. That's the justification part of it. So no, it's not circular. And believe me, it's not circular because we're actually careful in philosophy about these sorts of things.
Okay,
So what's
I'm
this
listening
Gettier
because I
problem, then?
didn't understand the get. Oh, sorry. Yeah, say again.
So Gettier is the guy's name. I think it's John Gettier. He writes this paper in the 60s. It's a quick paper and basically showing the issue with the definition of justified true belief, because you might have a justification, it gets you to a true belief, but it actually only happens to be something ultimately accidental. You might have the justification that the person who wins the election in 2 weeks is going to be Harris if I have quarters in my pocket. I have quarters in my pocket, and let's suppose in a couple weeks Harris does win the presidency. I don't know if that's true or not, but let's just say that is. Now, that was my justification that I had coins in my pocket. Harris did actually win in this hypothetical thing. Therefore, would we say that I knew Harris was going to win?
Okay. Yeah, no, you
That's
couldn't absolutely conclude that from it. Sure. Okay.
So you have a justification, you have a true belief, but it doesn't seem like that justification should have given you knowledge. So that's the kind of thing that Gettier was pointing forward, and it's been causing a ruckus in philosophy for the last half century or more. I do not know where the state of the field is because I'm not a professional philosopher. I just know that this has been one of the hangups in that aspect of there. But here's the key thing is, hey, here's someone who has true beliefs, but for reasons that we don't think ought to justify you for having that belief, even if it got you to true belief for whatever reason. Ultimately, skeptics like me or scientists in general would like to say, hey, we don't want to just have true beliefs or models that happen to work. We want to know why they work and use things that do work to actually make progress rather than just randomly guess the right answer and feel good that we got it right this time.
Okay, but don't you see the problem in the language, the terms that you're using? You're saying works, right? You're saying, does it work? That's almost like saying, is it true? It's almost the same thing, synonymous, right? Is it true? Does it work? Well, the problem is that there's a double standard, right? Because getting to your own philosophical understanding or your own belief system in order to do anything, right, you kind of have to operate as if certain things are true. Even if you don't have evidence for them, you presuppositionally come to that point. You say, well, I have to accept that A plus B equals C or whatever the case is in order to cross the street, and therefore I live. Well, just because I live, does that mean it's true? No, you could die and it's still true. It could be false, right? So my point is that there's this double standard. It's like for the skeptic worldview, it's acceptable in order to get to certain conclusions because it has utility and that utility works. Well, meaning what, right? But for the theistic perspective, it works too, coming to the conclusion that God exists, it protects you from certain things, you accept the precepts of that religion, and that enhances you and so forth, and it has utility, and it benefits you, and you see logical conclusion or logical problems without having a God, how did things come to be? How was there matter without something putting it there?
If you're going to say that there's no problems in theism, I'm going to ask you right now, where did God come from?
That's a nonsensical question.
Can God create a stone so heavy that he himself cannot lift it?
Well, again, another nonsensical question. They're both nonsensical questions.
Does God
Why?
know what
Because
it's like to not understand something?
That's another nonsensical question. It's like these are questions that don't
with
make
its
sense.
ideas of omnipotence and omniscience and omnibenevolence has all sorts of other logical conundrums that, guess what? Theologians and philosophers to this day are still grappling with because they realize they also don't quite understand how these things work, and they don't want to just throw out the God concept, but they also realize this whole omnipotence thing is really confusing. We don't actually even know what it is, so we need to come up with definitions and change definitions to make sure that God still is almighty, but not make sure we're not, tripping over our own shoelaces in defining it. Like the idea of God making a burrito so hot that he himself can't eat it, to use the Simpsons version of the paradox.
Yeah, but those are nonsensical questions because those questions don't fit in with what the belief of a God is. We don't believe God
exactly.
has
So the
a
only
tongue
way
that can
your
be
belief's
burned.
going to be maintained is to go la 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 la. I don't see any problems. That is the worst form of epistemology I have ever heard.
That's what's so frustrating about this, Rob, is that like you're saying these are nonsensical questions after having this whole conversation where you're saying you guys shouldn't be so hard on logical fallacies. And now you're saying, yeah, but that doesn't fit into my personal worldview, therefore it can't be real. It doesn't make any sense to me. What we're talking about is something that is consistent. You can come to all manner of truth by using the rules of logic and avoiding the fallacies that we're talking about. For you, all you're doing is justifying your own beliefs in your own head, the same way that millions of people who believe different things than you, incompatibly different things than you, also do. And you don't come to any truth whatsoever, because faith that you're professing is not a reliable pathway to the truth. You can have faith in something and it could be true, but you have no way of knowing that.
So that's a knowledge question. We're not asking. It's not a knowledge issue. It's an issue of belief. It's not an issue of knowledge. We have no way of knowing that.
Does it matter?
We have no way of knowing that. We have a way of believing that. That's the point.
Rob, does it matter to you if the things you believe are true or not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Does it matter to you? Of course. I mean, you wouldn't be human if that weren't the case.
So then, if you're talking about the idea that there is some guy that made the universe and stuff and like has magic powers to create life and all these things, if you're talking about this guy, then you should care about whether or not that's true. How do we determine if something is true? How do we determine if something is true?
Great. So how do we determine if something is true? Depends on which worldview you have. If you're coming from a skeptical worldview, you have one way. If you're coming from a theistic worldview, then you have a different way.
Is that it works generally. It doesn't matter what your background beliefs are. The whole point of logic and epistemology is start with this, you can reach this conclusion. It doesn't start with, I already believe this and I want this to be true, therefore I will get to my conclusion. The whole point of logic is for it to be sound no matter what your worldview is.
Yeah, but every single worldview, every single one, including yours, whether it's slightly different from Forrest or the other, your worldview has presuppositions that you have to accept without knowing whether or not it is actually definitely true. Every single worldview has them, but some worldviews lead to contradictions and others don't. There's a saying that I literally always say to people is that consistency is the hallmark of truth. So if it's not consistent, it's not true, right? So it's probably not true. And I see from a theistic perspective, it is perfectly consistent. In the skeptical perspective, you can't even claim something is true. You can't even claim that it is true 100%. Is there anything in your worldview where you can claim something is absolutely true?
Because here's the thing. You can only be 100% certain if you yourself are an omniscient God. Rob, are you God?
No, I don't believe what you think. It's loaded.
So then you don't have any certainty either. So then you don't have any certainty.
No, it's a loaded question. You asked a question
Rob,
that's loaded.
You came in here complaining about logical fallacies, and now you're claiming we're making logical fallacies. Pick a lane.
No, well, first of all, I'm using your own skeptical perspectives to discount your own arguments. I'm not saying that I agree with it. I don't agree with it. I'm actually saying that there are some logical fallacies that can be used.
Rob, let's actually
I'm saying logical fallacies.
Let's actually not just shit at each other. Come on.
No, I'm not. I'm saying logical fallacies because the problem is this. It's language, right? When you categorize something as logical fallacy and you pronounce it as something that is absolutely wrong and false and pronounce that to everybody that it's absolutely wrong and false, then people are going to see that tag as, it's automatically bad and we shouldn't even believe it. But actually, I don't agree with that. I don't see, and that's why I said we don't agree with what is evidence. Evidence is different.
It's not saying it's wrong and false. I'm sorry. I was going to say it's not saying that it's wrong and false.
Down to brass tacks.
Sure, you go ahead.
I want to get down to brass tacks. Rob, over and over again, apparently your frustration has been is that we've been somehow dismissive of the evidence that you have for the existence of God. How about we just talk about what that evidence is rather than saying we're just going to dismiss it?
Well, that wasn't why I called in. We could definitely do that if you wanted to talk about the evidence, but again,
Rob,
we have to be clear because
about you bitching and moaning that we're not going to listen to your evidence if you're not even willing to present it. So
no, it's fine. I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem presenting it. I'm saying that you have to accept first that my evidence is different. My evidence comes from emotional. It could come from testimonial.
You're literally saying you have to accept the fact that I'm going to use logical fallacies and say things that are untestable and unprovable, and you just got to be okay with that. Is that really how you're wanting to start this?
Because God is immaterial. That's why. It has to be abductive, inductive. It has to be from those perspectives that you come to conclusions. And every deductive argument is presuppositional anyway.
Rob,
so you have to grant certain
What's your evidence? What's your evidence?
No, okay, sure. You want to talk about the evidence? We'll talk about the evidence. Okay. So there was there's something called, and I think everybody knows this, right? The cosmological argument's a pretty simple one, right? Everything that begins to exist has a cause.
One of the
universe
worst
began to exist, right? Okay. So now you could try to discount that, but it is in line with not only empirical evidence. It's not only in line with empirical evidence. It's consistent, right? So therefore,
Rob, this is where you're
if the universe had to,
because here's the thing: we don't know that the universe had a beginning. We don't know if the universe actually had a start, and we can't know that based on current evidence. Our current evidence is also consistent with a universe existing in some form infinitely into the past.
We don't need to know. It's a belief claim. These are beliefs. We're saying, why do we believe it? We believe because there's evidence.
How you actually get to a justified true belief? You actually have to have justification, not just, I want this to be true. If you want to be convincing, you actually have to have evidence for your beliefs.
You said, Rob, that you care about whether or not what you believe is true. You said that you care about what your beliefs are true. So how do you then justify? How do you justify that the universe had a beginning? If we don't know that, if we don't have evidence for that, how do you know?
We do have evidence. We even have empirical evidence for that, right? Because we have.
But you just said it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Evidence doesn't matter. You said so. You said you have different kinds of evidence, and you've been talking about how logical fallacies are bad or logical fallacies are okay this whole time. So,
anybody could rewind this and see that I never said that. I never said that. All I said was
you said
also
God is
include
immaterial,
everything.
so we can't actually have the evidence that you're talking about. You said it's not going to be empirical. It's not going to be sense data. So that's actually what you did say.
Yes, but that's about God. I'm talking about the cause of the universe. So I'm talking about the cause of the. I'm talking about how the universe came to be caused. No, I'm saying that the universe had a cause. Then you can logically infer from that, if it had a cause, there must be some power in order to create it.
You might have heard earlier on that we actually say premise 1 in the Kalam-Cosmo argument, it's premise 2 in the argument that we're saying is actually not a justified or evidently true premise. We don't know that the universe had a beginning. We have plenty of cosmological models that suggest it works just fine having the universe always existing in some form before the hot phase of the Big Bang.
So what evidence is there to suggest that? I would love to see that evidence.
So actually, one of the things we know is, if I may, go ahead.
Okay,
go ahead.
I just wanted to, no, I'm sorry. My evidence is faith.
Well, that's great answer, but it doesn't really fulfill, right? So the point is that if you're saying, because you're stating that you have evidence.
Are you saying
showing that?
Yes, my evidence for it. I'm sorry, Aaron. I promise I'll let you explain in a second. But my evidence for it isn't empirical. My evidence for an internal universe is faith. It's emotion. It's belief. It's what Aaron would call a logical fallacy. But we can't discredit it because of that.
No, so I never said that the evidence for God is only these things. My point from the beginning was that they are all comprehensive. There's a corpus of points. All of those points lead to
God. They should be thrown out. Now, if I may, guess what? We actually do have some interesting evidence worth noting. So first off, one of the major dominant explanations for our universe. You mentioned the Big Bang, but specifically, the version we have is using something also called inflation. And inflation has some pretty good empirical support for it. And one of the things that we can see from our theory of inflation is that actually it can project back indefinitely. It actually will also be creating universes all the time forever. And we do have empirical evidence.
Inflation, what does that mean?
Inflation,
what does that mean
cosmic
exactly?
inflation. So basically that the universe in its early phase wasn't just growing, but there was a phase in time early in the universe where the universe was expanding at an exponential rate.
Okay. And it is still expanding
And
at
we
an
do
exponential
have empirical
rate. So,
evidence that justifies that particular thing. And so that's some empirical evidence. And guess what? Inflation actually gives justification to it. Actually, one of the predictions from inflation is a multiverse. That there are things actually before the hot phase of the Big Bang.
But that didn't explain that the universe is eternal, past eternal. All that did is say, hey, it could have been expanding at a certain point, which I agree.
Can exist into the past indefinitely. And since that's the case, then guess what? If that can exist indefinitely, then there is nothing necessary that the universe says it had to begin on the beginning. And the inflation that we have the evidence for suggests that something existed before the Big Bang, that something has always existed is consistent with that evidence. Rob,
but that's problematic. That goes against other science. Other science says that the universe.
Today?
So I've heard about it, but I didn't know that it was that term. So no, I did not know that it was that term, but I've heard about the universe expanding
what is and is not consistent with a theory you know nothing about.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it's inconsistent with actual science, right? What is the science says that the universe is continually expanding, and it's
you don't know what you're talking about.
No, I'm saying that the universe is expanding exponentially.
He works at MIT.
I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying that inflation is not correct.
You just said it was non-scientific.
I'm just saying.
So guess what, Rob?
No,
you've now decided to go and say, fuck all science because it gets in the way of what argument I'm trying to make, and keep going with any other fallacies you might want to commit tonight. He says, yes, I'm going to use the F word.
No, you're missing my point.
F word.
You're missing my point. You're missing my point.
I'm saying a lot of interesting science that we've been establishing for the last 40 plus years.
Okay. So someone won a prize for discovering that the universe is not only expanding but accelerating, right? The fact that it's accelerating means there's no big crunch, it's not coming back together, there's no infinite, everything just expands into infinity, essentially. Everything disperses. So if that's the case, how can you say that it is past eternal when it's accelerating, and the acceleration means it's never going to go back? There's no way to say that it's past eternal unless you start talking about a multiverse, which is all theoretical. I'm just talking about evidence. We're talking about evidence. The universe began to exist, and the evidence points to that, which is the Big Bang, background radiation, all of the other
I just told you you're
everything that
absolutely
points
wrong
back.
about that, and every cosmologist would tell you you're wrong about that as well.
About which?
That we know that the universe started at the Big Bang. That is very much a minority position in modern cosmology.
Whether it's a minority position or not, you see, that's a logical fallacy right there, isn't it? Because we're appealing to
actually,
the numbers.
Rob, what you just said.
Rob,
Rob, can you
just because it's a logical fallacy doesn't mean that it's not true, right? Isn't that what you
it's
called
not
in
my
to
worldview.
say?
It's not my worldview. That's your worldview. That's why you shouldn't. That's why you shouldn't use it.
You lied about what the science is. You lied. You came out here
I
and
said
you
that's
said
why
this is what
you
the
shouldn't
science
use it, not
actually says,
me.
and you were wrong about that. Now, once you start lying, you don't get to talk about what's fallacious and not. You've now showed that you can't be trusted to speak.
I'm not lying. I'm just showing you what's true. That's all.
You said what the science is and what isn't science. And now you're claiming that you know better than all the scientists about what science is. Guess what? You lied about what the state of science is because you don't know anything about it.
Other than straw man, you're misrepresenting my point, but it's okay. You're misrepresenting my point. That's not what I meant.
I can't make straw man.
Well, I mean, it's a misrepresentation of my point.
You said that first off, you never even heard of cosmic inflation before here. Second, you think that somehow the expansion of the universe precludes the existence of a universe before the Big Bang, which guess what? That isn't what most cosmologists think. Guess what? What you're saying about the
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Appeal to authority. So what?
Actually, in cosmology.
That's not appeal to authority. You don't even know how to use the arguments about logical fallacies because you don't know what they are.
He said
didn't pick one specific cosmologist. He addressed all cosmological science.
You can look up the definition. You can look up the definition.
I just showed you a textbook where I ran through them. Modern cosmology is not appeal to authority.
Anybody in your audience can look that up. A cosmologist, that's an appeal to an authority. That's a logical fallacy that you used. You're using logical fallacies all the time in your language. This is my point.
I dare you to be honest for once. Did he say
totally honest?
A cosmologist says this? Or did he say modern cosmology, cosmologists, plural, say this? Yes, which isn't an authority. That is a body of authorities, which is a different thing that isn't a fallacy.
That is also a logical fallacy. To say,
that's
millions of people believe in God. If you say millions of people believe in God,
that's not the same thing.
It is a fallacy.
That's a different thing entirely, and that's also not what he said.
Here's the thing. What you came in here and said is that the science proves that the universe had a beginning. I pointed out that the people who actually study this do not actually see that as a justified conclusion. You cannot say the science justifies your position if the scientists who do this are actually saying, no, you can't get there. You would actually have to basically be saying that you, Rob, know more than all the scientists who actually work on this, even though you don't even know what cosmic inflation is.
So you see, you're trying to ad hominem attack me here because I didn't know the word inflation.
I'm saying you don't know
that doesn't make a difference. Is my point valid or not? Is my point valid or not? That's the only question. That's the only question. Is what I'm saying valid or not?
If it kicked you in the keister.
Seriously, that's not at all what he said.
That's all.
No, it's not. It's not valid, Rob. What is your training? What is your training in physics and cosmology? What is your training?
Doesn't make a difference.
Yes, it
doesn't make a difference. The point is, what my statement is that the universe.
You know about science,
Rob, I'm so fucking sick of it.
Guess what? You don't know.
Seriously, I've muted you, Rob, because it's so fucking obnoxious for you to say it doesn't matter what I do or don't know. I have decided what science is, and the people who study this for a living are all wrong because of what I have decided, despite the fact that I don't even know the basic terminology of it. I'm a biologist, and I know what fucking cosmic inflation is because it's relevant. It's not even my area. And for you to sit here and say you know better than all these physicists and then commit a bunch of logical fallacies and tell us what they are when your whole argument at the beginning was that they shouldn't matter, it's ridiculous. Stick to a fucking script, because trying to use our worldview against us clearly isn't working for you. You're doing it wrong. I'm going to bring you back on. I have 2 questions for you, but I'd love to hear you respond to what Aron has been trying to get across to you for the past 10 minutes.
Is cosmic... The only thing you're banking on is cosmic inflation? That's it?
Nope. That's not what he's banking on. That's not at all what he said.
No, okay, so I didn't know I was even muted. We were both talking. I didn't realize that. Sorry, you had a question?
That's really unfortunate because we just laid out what you needed to know.
Yeah, because I couldn't hear you when I was talking, so I didn't know I was on mute. I didn't realize that.
Right. Here's a question for you.
It helps.
Yeah, I have a totally different question that I want to go back to. Is that cool with you, Aron, or did you have something in this you wanted to stick to?
Go for it.
Sweet. I was speaking to Aron there when you were saying yes. So a bit ago, when you were talking about how the Big Bang is certainly a thing that was the beginning of the universe, which again, we don't know that. And you said that therefore, God, and Aron rightly pointed out, we don't know. The universe could be eternal. And you said, what's your evidence for that? I said, the evidence is faith. I would like to hear your response. Why is my faith in an eternal universe not a good enough justification in your worldview, not mine?
In my worldview?
Yep.
Well, I never said that faith alone was the only reason to believe in something. So that's why it's not justified.
What else do I need?
We have pathways to evidence. That is, and our evidence is 3 essentially, right? And it's Arabic, right? So it's ilm al-yaqeen, haqq al-yaqeen, and ayn al-yaqeen. One is empirical. That is empirical information that you see, the sensory, and so on and so forth. It's also which comes from revelation. So we believe that revelation also defines truth and defines certain things and sets standards. That revelation setting those standards helps us to understand. And then you have ilm al-yaqeen, knowledge, right? Logic and rationality and so forth. All of that, the corpus of those 3 main avenues to truth and to certainty, all of that leads to
the empirical
all of those
evidence.
are pathways to evidence.
As Aron just laid out, the empirical evidence seems to suggest that an eternal universe is possible, if not likely. So I've got empirical on my side. Also logic. I have logic on my side. It doesn't make sense for the universe just to come into being. There has to be something outside of it, and outside the universe doesn't make any sense because that's asking about what's outside of everywhere. So logic and revelation. Also, I'm telling you right now that actually I spoke to a different God than yours that says yours isn't real and the universe is eternal and that she did not make it. It's just been there the whole time and she just came across it one day. So I have all three lines of your evidence. And why is the universe not eternal then? Why do you know I'm wrong?
Okay, so let's go through them one by one. And I didn't write it down, so if you can remind me. You said, number one, you said that the universe is possibly past eternal. You didn't say that it absolutely is. So something
but the empirical evidence, as Aron just very articulately laid out, shows that it's very likely. That's actually one of the things that a lot of cosmologists are saying is very much a possibility. So what we have, the empirical evidence on the table, is pointing in that direction.
Okay, so I guess that's a closed door. There's absolutely no way that could be untrue.
There's no way for us to know because we don't have, if we're just talking about empirical evidence, we don't have any further evidence to point us in one way or the other.
Okay, so from even my worldview, your worldview, yeah, so you'd have to be agnostic. You can't say that it is evidence, and you can't even say there's empirical evidence. Would have to have.
I'm asking in
testable.
your
That's
world.
Not even testable.
Remember?
Yeah, but in my worldview, in my world, in my worldview, obviously it's not only not logical, it's not rational. There's no empirical evidence to support it. That's why I would say that it is not a justified answer. It's not a justified solution to how the world or the universe came to be or was here. What is past eternal? I don't see that as even being plausible. Now, that's just one. We can go to the other point because I like the other point better, which you said.
But I have other evidence, and my empirical evidence is actually really good, but I'm having a hard time explaining it. It just makes me feel good to be that way, to think that way. But I do have the empirical evidence.
Pretty mature, right? You would say that. Well, that's a
logical fallacy. That's a logical fallacy called the appeal to emotion fallacy. But we're in your worldview, not mine. So I have the empirical evidence. I just can't express it to you. I have a hard time expressing it to you. Mm-hmm. I'm telling you that God actually spoke to me, and she told me that your God isn't real and that the universe is eternal. And that means a lot to me and has a lot of meaning to my heart. And she also told me that there is empirical evidence, but I don't remember it and I can't recite it to you. And just because I can't present it to you doesn't mean that it's not real. So it's important that you believe it and take it seriously.
So what you have experienced, you experienced for yourself, right? And this is actually why I think this is probably the strongest evidence that you have. The strongest evidence that you would have is this is my own personal experience. This is how I feel. Yep. And this is why I never debate with Christians who say, I saw Jesus, right? Jesus came to me and so forth. Okay, that was your
because
experience.
They're all correct.
Maybe not. Maybe not. But how does that inform me as to what the truth is? Right, your subjective personal experience doesn't inform me as to what my experience or what my belief should be. Maybe I may trust you, or maybe I may think that you have something more than that's consistent, and that's why I may trust.
I have quite
your
a bit,
statement, but
I have tons of evidence, tons of empirical evidence that the universe is eternal.
But you're a person who has already admitted that you don't believe in a God. So how am I going to trust? your subjective?
No, it's not true at all.
Point?
I do believe in her. I just told you. She came to me and she spoke to me.
Yeah, and you see that's the problem, is that it's coming out of your mouth. If it was coming out of somebody else's mouth, that'd be different, right? Somebody who actually believes in a God. Then I might say, who is this person? What did they...
Just go with... No, seriously. If I was anybody else, go through this with me. I'm telling you, I believe in a God. She spoke directly to me. She told me your God isn't real, and she told me that the universe is eternal. And she gave me tons of empirical evidence that I just can't vocalize to you. I'm having a hard time with it, but there really is empirical evidence out there. And also, lots and lots of other people believe this too.
this caricaturization of what a person who's a theist believes. Every theist in the audience is laughing because that's just not the way we see things. We don't just trust based on someone came and said. No, I'm saying I'm just trying to tell you we don't believe based on this type of somebody came and just said, hey, this is true and I saw God. Okay, Rob, maybe, but let's go further.
Rob, over the 44 minutes of this call, especially in the last 10 minutes, you've said that revelation is a form of evidence. I am giving you that revelation. Mm-hmm. You have also said that logical fallacies don't necessarily rule out arguments in your worldview. That's not necessary. I've given you two of them, emotional appeal to emotion and bandwagon fallacy. Those should not rule out my arguments. You've also said that just because I can't prove something is true doesn't mean it necessarily isn't, and you shouldn't discredit it so quickly. I'm telling you, I have plenty of empirical evidence that the universe is internal. I just can't give it to you. That means you cannot discredit it. And my arguments from emotion and bandwagon don't discredit it. And I also have revelation, which you can't disprove. So I'm asking you, why don't you believe it?
See, the problem is that you're saying you have revelation, right? You have revelation. Yep. Oh, revelation came to me
from God herself.
But you would have to demonstrate that revelation was actual and real, that it came from the source. How do you prove that? How do you show that comes from the source? You do that. There has to be miracles that are it's something that can't be exported into the 4 dimensions of this world that we live in as far as we know, right? It's something that can't be exported into. We cannot, for instance, let's say the sky just split open and it, spewed words of whatever the case is, right? And that those were divine words, or those words, they were about God and his nature and so on and so forth.
What's an example of a miracle
that we say? Yes,
what's an example of miracle?
Would be the types of things. Okay, well, I mean, I'm giving myself away, but we believe that the Quran is a miracle. We believe that it has miraculous verses. We believe that it has information that couldn't have been known at the time. We believe lots of things about it, right? And all of that leads to evidence that supports. In fact, actually, it's so funny. One of the primary evidences from the Quran, it actually says that those who don't believe in God, they're not sure of anything. It says it in the Quran. Those that don't believe in God, they have no sure knowledge of anything. It's not false. It's true.
I just disproved your whole religion.
How is it false? You said yourself you cannot.
He's sure of it.
But
he's sure of it. He's 100% sure. Look.
Then that's not consistent with not believing in God.
I have this scripture that says the universe is real and shit, and that's something that nobody could have possibly. It's written down. See that? And the fact is,
okay, this is not
Aaron just told you. Aaron just told you that cosmologists are arguing about this. They don't know for sure. I have a scripture that does know for sure, and pretty soon they're going to figure it out, and I'll be proven right. And Aaron knows for sure that what you said is bullshit. That means that we know things for sure, and we have divine revelation in scripture. And I just told you, I spoke to God and she said that your God isn't real and that the universe is eternal, and she has empirical evidence for it, and I feel it in my heart, and millions of other people believe me. So all of this is a reason for you to believe.
But it's not, because half of the things you said are not actually true. They're not factual.
How do you know?
And that's just something you have to know. Because you yourself have contradicted yourself by saying before this you don't believe in a God, by saying before this that revelation
happened during the call. It happened during the call. I've been an atheist this whole time, and while you were talking to Rob, she came down and took my brain into space and was like, look, bitch, the thing's eternal. It happened while we were talking. So I am now a theist and I believe in her. And she is telling me that your God isn't real and that the universe is eternal, and that I'm sure, I am 100% sure of it. How do you know I'm wrong?
Well, okay, so I'll just tie this up because I think we're actually going into a good ending, right? The first point of this call was what? Was to say that there are things that you speak like things are true, but in reality, you don't actually believe things are true. You just believe that you can get close to it or maximally close to it. You might be true. There could be a fault. There could be maybe 99% true. And you said that to the last caller. I remember I was listening. So as I mentioned, in the Quran, it says those who don't believe in God, they're unsure they're not sure about anything. So if you're not sure about anything,
you know what?
the statement is there. I mean, unless you're actually sure about something.
He's sure.
Unless you're actually sure about something. Sure meaning that you know it's true, that you have knowledge, not a belief claim, knowledge that it is true.
Yes. Knowledge.
You believe it is true.
Absolute knowledge. Yes, 100%, 110%. How do you know I'm wrong?
Look, it's not about me knowing. I just know your worldview. I just know from a skeptical perspective.
You don't know my worldview. I am no longer a skeptic. God, no, Rob, I'm not a skeptic anymore. I believe in this God. I'm telling you. How do you know I'm wrong? Yeah, to a completely different religion that taught me that your God is not real and that the universe is eternal and that anything I write on this whiteboard is actually truth. She told me that. How do you know I'm wrong?
How do I know that you're wrong about your belief? You said that you believe in this God.
No, about the truth.
How do I know that you're wrong about that?
The knowledge that I'm telling you, 100% certainty that this God is real and it's not yours, and she says yours is a dick and also not real.
Okay, so so there's a number of ways I can answer this because I'm not 100% sure, and I'm being honest right now. I'm not 100% sure exactly how you want me to answer.
The Quran says those who are not sure are the wrong ones, Rob.
No, I'm saying, are you saying, how do I know that you're not lying to me? Are you saying, how do I know that what your claim is true? Are you saying, how do I know that your God is not true? Know? Which one is it? Because
I'm asking you, how do you know that the God that I'm professing to you right now and the eternal universe that she did not create are not real?
That's a great question and very clear. I understand the question. Good. So how do I know? I asked the question, is your God that you're claiming to be a God, is it consistent with the qualities and attributes of what a God would be, right? A God would be something that is pretty powerful, right? If you believe in a God, then you believe that God has to be pretty powerful. Great.
She's incredibly
you
powerful.
Would believe that God is immaterial, that it has to have, there's nothing like it. It has to have uniqueness. It has to have not
she's
been
immaterial
created
where it counts.
by anything. Okay, well, then that wouldn't be the definition of a God. It would have to be immaterial.
Oh, no,
in the
no, you don't
sense.
understand. She is. I said she's immaterial where it counts. She's immaterial in the most important ways. Also, she said to me earlier that there's different definitions of a God that you don't understand. But she didn't allow me to explain it to you.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah, so I mean, then if it doesn't line up with what a God would be, right? Because a God it's very simple to understand what a God could be. God couldn't be something that's, born into the earth and, then you have the quagmire of, well, then who created it and how did it come to be if he was God before that? And so it creates a lot of problems logically. So it has to be something that is, okay, so it's immaterial. It's something that's immaterial, that it has power, and it is unique. And okay, great. Then we're just saying the same thing. We're just calling it different names. We're just calling it different names.
No.
That's all we're doing.
No, she specifically told me that all the names that you pick are wrong, and also your God isn't real, and also the universe is eternal. And she said specifically that the God that Rob believes, she told me, she said the God Rob believes in isn't any kind of real, and also smells bad. Even if it was real, stinky guy. So like she's not into it. So we're not just using the same terminology.
Okay. So you're claiming that this God that you believe in spoke to you, and you expect that I would believe because of what? What did you and what are you bringing with you besides the claim? What are you bringing with you besides the claim
revelation.
that I should
divine
believe?
Revelation?
No. But divine revelation is not as simple as you claiming it. It's not just a claim. You're coming with
it's not just a claim
that are factual.
It's
You're
not just a claim.
Statements. You're coming with proof. You're coming with evidence. Yes, it's not just.
Yes,
it's not
divine
just a claim.
Revelation. It isn't just a claim. It's the truth. She told me. Just because you don't know it right now doesn't mean that it's not true.
Forrest, that's why I said earlier that this is a characterization of how we believe in the revelation. We don't just take any claim.
It's not at
Anybody
all.
can claim anything. Then that means all claims are equal, and all claims are not equal. Some claims are strong, and some claims are not. And so, look, there have been false prophets in the past. Many false prophets, people who say, God spoke to me. Elijah Muhammad, he was a reincarnation of some other prophet. Right,
no,
but that's not how it works. We look at
that's not what I'm claiming at all. That's not what I'm claiming at all. I'm showing you. I'm explaining to you that this God actually really performed a miracle. She actually
Okay, and what
relayed
is that
herself
miracle?
to me and told me all sorts of things. What's an example of a miracle that you know? Yes. What's an example of a miracle? What does a miracle
personal.
mean?
That's personal and subjective. If
What's
you
a
were
miracle?
to,
what is a miracle?
Like I said,
to what
I am
Muhammad got
answering
from
it.
Gabriel.
I'm answering it.
So honestly,
I'm
I
answering
don't
it.
think you're doing much to answer
I'm
anything.
answering it. I'm answering the question. You asked me what is a miracle, and I did answer that earlier. I said that it cannot be exported. It can't be explained by the four-dimensional world. This material, it can't be explained in that specific way. Something that is outside of the productive capacity of nature.
She performed that.
Yeah, but it didn't actually happen for us. I mean, I know you're trying with the analogy, but it's not working. It's not working.
What she did is she put a magical goblin in my closet right over here. He's there right now. She produced him out of nothing. De novo, de nihilo. She made him and put him in the closet. And if I were to open the closet, I could check to see if he's there. But I'm not trying to test my faith because that would be testing her, and that's just sacrilegious. So but it did happen, and you can't prove that it didn't because you're not here in my house. You can't check the closet.
It's not about.
And she did other stuff too.
She
did a lot of other stuff happen too. She did a lot of other cool things.
Yeah, I mean, nobody on Earth is accepting this claim because the claim has no justification. It's just words.
That doesn't mean it's not true. That doesn't mean it's not true.
I'm not saying it is absolutely not true. I'm saying I believe it's not true. That's the point. That was the point from the beginning. That it is not a knowledge claim. It's a claim of belief.
But you said we're working in your worldview, not
ours. My
ours.
evidence is different than yours. Huh? Sorry?
My evidence is really important. My evidence is very real. My evidence is revelation, and I have empirical evidence, and I have whatever the third one was. I have all three of them.
Okay, so your evidence is what again? What was your evidence with this particular claim that you have? Said some person with a goblin and all that. What was your evidence?
I have divine revelation. I have divine revelation. I have that was one of your things of evidence. I have empirical evidence as well. I'm just not very good at communicating that. And you started this call by saying that doesn't mean something isn't true and that we shouldn't be discrediting things just based on logical fallacies. We're working in your worldview, not ours. I told you I'm not a skeptic anymore. I'm totally going based on your worldview. So these logical fallacies don't matter anymore. And I also said that we have tons and tons of evidence, and I can't remember what the third thing that you said was some other form of evidence.
Philosophical,
but I have that
philosophical,
yes, logical and philosophical evidence. I have that as well.
Yep,
I've got
logic, rationality.
I've got it.
Yeah, but that wasn't logical at all, and it wasn't rational either. The point is that you said logical fallacies. I'm only saying that there are certain arguments that are evidence that you classify as a logical fallacy that I don't see.
We're not talking about me.
Discount it as evidence. That's what I'm saying.
Rob, we're not talking about me.
To discount it.
We're not talking about me. We're talking about your worldview, remember?
Yes.
Yes, and I'm in your worldview now because I'm no longer a skeptic and I believe in this magical Callipygian goddess. That's what I believe in.
The problem is
and I am here to tell you she's real.
You're misclassifying and mischaracterizing my worldview. That's the problem. Honestly, this is a good conversation. I don't actually think you're the worst dude in the world or you're trying to be disingenuous. This is a good conversation. And honestly, if you really want to understand our worldview, just take some time. We could sit down and talk about it at length because we haven't had an opportunity to. The beginning of this call is literally just to show you where there were contradictions in your worldview. That's all.
So, Rob, I want to jump in on one other point here when it comes to knowledge and revelation, because you brought up revelation as a source of knowledge. Can a revelation provide information that's false? Can someone get false information from a revelation?
No. False. Qualify false information. What do you mean exactly? Do you mean that it's untrue? Do you mean that it's... Yeah, go ahead.
If I am told something through revelation and I find out by, say, scientific means that it's not true, if it's revealed to me that the Earth is on pillars, but we actually see that it's not, would we say the revelation is false?
No, we would say the revelation is true and that the science is faulty because the science is inductive. So yeah, it absolutely, that's the way we would see it.
So literally,
and you couldn't argue against it because it is inductive.
Rob, you basically just made sure that revelation guarantees you will stay wrong, because all you have to do is say it was revealed to me, and there is nothing anyone can ever say or do to show that you're wrong.
And now back to what I was, now to the most important part of the call. Because I don't need that evidence and revelation is the most important, my revelation from the Callipygian goddess is actually real, and you can't say anything about it.
Let me just say one thing, because that is a great point.
Rob, whatever you say doesn't matter. It was revealed. It is done.
No, the point is that revelation has a sign. The signature of revelation is that it is consistent, that it's not something that, goblins popping out of here and there, things that don't work or don't make sense. That it's actually a sign that it is true.
Rob.
That's the point.
Wait a minute. You cannot say that revelation has to be logical and follow it, and then also miracles can't be part of it. You said that miracles were a necessary part of it. Miracles like goblins popping in the closet, miracle like flying to heaven on a winged horse, miracles like splitting the moon in two, miracles like healing the blind and walking on water. None of those things make logical sense. That's why they're miracles. You can't discount it just because it's something you don't like.
No,
yes, and Roland the Goblin is evidence of the Callipygian goddess that revealed herself to me.
And guess what? If I saw your goblin, that would be a point of evidence to prove your God, right? It would be a point.
That would be,
but it's not everything.
That's empiricism. That's discrediting all of the
overcome a revelation. Revelation.
You
first.
can't.
You can't go by this.
Revelation is the most important.
Stuff.
You said so.
Yes, revelation is the most important. I didn't say it wasn't.
You have to go by whatever you happen to have been told in a holy book has revealed.
Truth.
That's your position.
So what is revealed is tested when you read it and what its claims are. You read its claims.
And if the test is false, you say that you read it wrong. All you ever do then is obfuscate. You just said that if it was revealed that the earth is flat, and science cannot overcome that revelation.
If it was revealed, which it wasn't revealed. So, yeah, I mean,
that's the thing about the logic here. You have said that revelation trumps science always. Therefore, empiricism
because science is inductive. Yes, of course.
Unable to give us knowledge. You have basically said, no matter what the empirical evidence is, this is what you will believe because it is revealed. No matter what. So guess what? You can't talk about science proving it. You have basically said nothing could ever go against the revelation. Anything that did is false.
And I have more prophecy I have more scripture. This is from our holy prophet Doja Cat.
Wait, I want to just explain. I just want to explain why.
Hips and waist.
Because let me just say why. Because I trust the revelation, but I don't just trust the revelation for no reason. I trust the revelation. The revelation has points in it that speaks to your spirit, that speaks to your reality from a physical, emotional perspective, from a psychological perspective.
It speaks
about history.
Yes,
it speaks about history accurately. All of those things together.
Rob, those are the kinds of logical fallacies that you said we couldn't use, or we couldn't discredit.
No,
so I am now giving them to you.
I didn't say that.
You said we couldn't discredit them because they're. I'm telling you that this is something that matters to my soul. It matters to me deeply, and it informs every part of my life, and it's consistent with reality, and it has miracles, and it has scripture, and it has prophecy, and more importantly, it is divinely revealed, which means absolutely nothing can prove it wrong. Even the most profound empirical evidence doesn't matter, because I am telling you that our Callipygian goddess brought my brain to the sky and proved to me that your God is not real.
Tell me how I'm wrong. You're just all you're doing is changing the names. That's an easy one. Anyone can do that. You can literally say, here's the book. It's the Quran, right? If you believe in the Quran. Here's the Quran, but we're going to call it the Fur'an. And, we believe in the Fur'an, but it's the same content. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing. You're saying the same thing twice. So if you're saying the same thing, it's completely the same thing. It's no different.
It's completely different. She said the
Quran is wrong. About what is and is not the Bible, they are not the same. And I believe you will find that many Christians will definitely say they are not the same as Jews, and Jews will not say they are the same as Christians, even though they worship the same God, allegedly.
You're talking about the Bible and the Torah?
As an example.
Are you talking about the Bible and the Torah?
As an example, he gave.
Yeah, those are problematic because this is the same point. This is why I said you have to learn our worldview really to understand it. We don't just.
I have been presenting your worldview for 15 minutes.
No, you really haven't. Trust me, there's a lot of problems with the way that you've presented it.
And Rob, again, everything you've said about how you feel about what your religion is doing and what it says about the past, the Mormons say the exact same thing. They have the burning in the bosom, and they are a rather close-knit, industrious group of folks who have overcome a lot of prejudice in this country and have now actually become, in some ways, outmatched in their power within the U.S. and have grown internationally, even though empirical science would say that there's no way that the Native Americans are actually lost Hebrew tribes. That's just empirical science getting in the way of the revelation that was given by the angel Moroni.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's to be expected.
It's all divine revelation.
To be expected that, it's to be expected that you're going to find consistent narratives and themes throughout different religions, because according to our belief is that all religions stem from the same source, just some of them are corrupted. That's all. So it's basically some of it is true, some of it is
false. Guess what?
The Callipygian goddesses
came to actually fix all those other religions. He has the real deal, and his is more recent. So he's also correcting your silly Quran stuff, because Joseph Smith knows better. He had the actual gold plates. Yep. He actually spoke to God directly himself, not through an intermediary, not through the angel Gabriel, directly to God himself, while off in a hill in Palmyra, New York, in the 1820s, I believe, is when the revelation allegedly took place.
Remember when you asked me earlier in the call, you asked me, can God reveal things that are not true? So he couldn't reveal, or would not, I should say, would not reveal another book or reveal to another prophet something that would contradict the fact that he said, this is the last prophet. Right? So if he says this is the last prophet, and then he makes another book that says, no, this is really the last prophet, then you know that's a contradictory problem. Why would I believe that?
It's because your book is false.
My point.
It's not real.
No,
You're right.
That's my point.
They don't contradict.
That's my point. I wouldn't believe that.
And the Callipygian goddess has told me that it's all, your God isn't real in the first place, so your book isn't real. So any contradictions that you see here aren't actually contradictions, because the entire Quran can be thrown out. It's complete garbage. That's what the Callipygian goddess told me.
We really need to put a button on this. It's been over an hour. Clips start being useless after an hour, so let's put a button on it.
Well, it was a great talk. Hey, look, I have no problems with this conversation. I think it was very beneficial.
I have one more question. Just one more. Rob, how do you tell the difference between a claim that you cannot prove using empirical evidence that comes from our worldview and a claim that just isn't true?
You're going to have to say that again, and I'm going to have to think about it, because I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but can you just try that again?
Yeah, this whole thing has been about how our worldview is unreliable, and how we can't use, you can't discredit logical fallacies, and how revelation trumps everything, and all these different things. How do you tell the difference between a claim that you cannot demonstrate to be true using any empirical methods, using our worldview, any of these things, and a claim that is actually false?
Claim that is actually false. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to think about it, because I don't want to give you a quick answer. I want to give you a correct answer. So I want to think about that, and I want to understand it better. And then, maybe I'll call back and we'll see how the conversation goes. This was good. I don't have a problem.
I'll give you the answer. You can't. But that's just me. Rob, it's been weird. Have an awesome rest of your day, man. Bye-bye. All praise our Callipygian goddess in the sky and her prophet Doja Cat. But that was a show. The show happened, and you were all here for it. And Aaron participated and was fucking awesome. Loved your breakdown of physics on several occasions, especially during that last call. Was a lot of fun. It's always funny when somebody calls and talks to a fucking scientist about the science that they specialize in and tells them that they know better because they read it in a book. It's a lot of fun. But
I should say, though, I am not a specialist in cosmology, so I do not want to take those accolades. I've studied it, but it is not my emphasis in my physics research, unfortunately.
You know more than me, and you and I both know a fuckload more than Rob, so it's all good. weird calls today, but fun ones. I'm really glad for all of them. And if you out there watching this show are thinking that anything that any of our callers said made any kind of sense, except for Maureen, she was fucking delightful. But like, if you have any other concerns about any of this, and you think the Big Bang's wrong, or evolution's wrong, or that you can prove God, or that you can disprove our Calipigian queen, this is your chance to call us. Only it isn't anymore because the show's over. Thank you so much. Call us next time. Bye. Oh, it's this now. It's this now.
Oh yeah.
I always forget it's this. And I have to sit here like an ass.
Go to our Patreon, patreon.com/calltheline. Plug stuff. We've got merch over on linemerch.com. You can get access to exclusive podcasts and all this amazing stuff. Woo, thank you. Amazing.
Much love to Maureen. Woman.